zero tolerance was a good idea, badly implemented. They just weren't prepared for the volume of children, he said. In contrast, another serving officer told me the months the policy was in place were the worst in his career.
And then he sent me a picture of them reuniting, the mother and daughter. And
it was a bit like that for Nora Nunez too. This former public defender in Yuma is still haunted by what happened to some of her clients.
I think of it as something to be ashamed of, that this country would purposefully separate families like that to try to deter them from coming to the United States.
At a Catholic church in Los Angeles, California, Teodoro is attending Mass with his wife and 4 children. 3 months after he was sent back to Guatemala, Angelina too was deported. They were lucky. They only spent 6 months apart and found each other again. The family flew north and were granted leave to remain for an initial 3 years. This edition of Border Stories was produced by Tim Mansell. Penny Murphy's the editor of Assignment.
That was Assignment from the BBC. I'm Jeff Goods, and this...
Well, good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and we are live in Manitoba's beautiful West Interlake, the land of lone highways and big skies, ranchers and cottagers, and lots of water. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Communities in Focus. We're live in Ashern at the Chicken Chef on the main street just off Highway 6 here. We have stories to share from this part of our beautiful province this morning, and grateful you're with us to start your day. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, or this morning online. It is, as mentioned, 3 minutes to 6 a.m. Current temperature here in Ashern is -8. Back in Winnipeg is sunny sky, clear sky, and a sunny day expected. Your high will be -5 today in the city of Winnipeg. Let's say good morning to Corey Funk, who's here on site with me as well. Good morning to Kurt Stark, who owns the Chicken Shop here. Thank you for having us, as well as Damien and Kiara and the whole team here. Abby Adeyemi and May McKillop are back in Winnipeg, as well as Brad Lilly's in our control room. Heather Wells is there too, so let's get your Thursday started with your news headlines.
Good morning. Well, a BC man who lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in an investment fraud is thankful he was able to get his money back, and he credits the recovery to actions taken in a Winnipeg fraud case that happened around the same time. We're going to hear what happened. And Winnipeg City Council has approved its 2024 budget. The operating budget passed yesterday with 14 votes in support, 1 against. The capital budget also passed 13-2. Minarski Councillor Ross Eady voted in favor of the budget for the first time in his 14 years on council. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
And thank you. In Winnipeg, -5, I mentioned, as a daytime high. It's -13 right now, though. Really chilly start to the morning. I know out here in the West Interlake, we did have just a little bit of frost on the windshields, reminding us that we're still, even though we're officially in spring, we've got those chilly starts. Well, in the first hour of the show, we're going to hear from an Eriksdale couple as Communities in Focus is looking at this whole West Interlake area. Eriksdale is about 20 minutes up the highway from here in Ashern, and there's a couple that started a music festival to honor their late friends. So we're going to hear some of the music and some of the stories. We're also going to take you to a live cattle auction here in Ashern that happened yesterday morning. It oversees the sale of thousands of cattle every Wednesday, and we'll find out more about what ranchers contribute to the economy here in this part of the province. Stay tuned. All that and more coming up.
Today on Q with Tom Power. It's not every day that you get to sit down with a pioneer of comedy, of film, and of TV, but I got to sit down with Carol Burnett to talk about the early days and all the ground she broke. All I can tell you is, what a storyteller.
I never thought of being a performer. I thought I would be a journalist.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The controversial Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline is nearing the finish line. In fact, the federal government-owned pipeline is beginning to hold oil. As business reporter Kyle Bax tells us, it is a milestone in a lengthy and costly process.
I reflect on some lyrics from a Grateful Dead song. What a long, strange trip it's been. 12 years from beginning to in-service.
On stage at the CERAWeek Energy Conference in Texas, Mark Mackey recounts the journey to develop and build the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline. Mackey is an executive with the Crown Corporation, owned by the federal government. He says the pipeline is beginning to fill with oil and is expected to make its first shipment before Canada Day.
We've got a couple things we need to get done, and once that's in place, we'll begin service.
The pipeline will transport oil from Alberta to the west coast, tripling the amount of an existing pipeline and giving an expected boost to Canadian oil prices. Mackey says the price tag could still rise or fall as final work is completed. The current $34 billion cost has been hit with the impacts of the pandemic, floods, and wildfires.
Yes, it is expensive. To do the project right, that's what it costs to build infrastructure.
It'll make a big difference on the differential.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says it was the right decision by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau 6 years ago to purchase the project.
I'm pleased that they stepped in to de-risk and finish the project.
Still, Smith says ideally the federal government would have supported other pipelines to ensure they too were built. As for Trans Mountain, once completed, the federal government has committed to selling it, including a stake to Indigenous communities. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Houston.
Protesting fishermen are back in front of the Newfoundland and Labrador legislature.
We're not going to give anybody a reason to call us an angry mob.
Organizers are urging them to remain peaceful. Scuffles broke out yesterday between protesters and staff trying to enter the building. The situation became so tense, Andrew Furey's government had to postpone its budget. It says it will table the budget again today. The fishermen are allowed to keep protesting, but a court injunction says they cannot block access to the legislature. Canada's health minister says he's looking to restrict the marketing and sale of nicotine pouches to kids. The pouches are placed between your cheek and gums. They're meant to help adults quit smoking. But there are growing concerns the pouches are creating new nicotine addiction in youth. Marina von Stackelberg reports.
Stay the hell away from our kids.
Canada's Health Minister Mark Holland with a scathing message to the makers of flavored nicotine pouches, 9 months after his department authorized their sale.
The tobacco industry yet again used a loophole.
Nicotine pouches sold in Canada under the name Zonic don't fall under any current tobacco or vaping laws, so nothing restricts where they can be sold or how old you must be to buy them. Plus, they come in colorful packages with fruity flavors.
We shouldn't be seeing flavors that are targeting kids. Flavors like, winter berry splash or whatever, tropical fruit.
Holland says he's seeking extra authority to restrict flavors, advertising, and what stores can sell Zonic. It's not clear how he'll do that, but it could be through legislation. Zonic spokesperson Eric Gagnon says his company has already taken steps to prevent kids from buying the pouches.
Every place you're going to see Zonic is behind the counter and age verified. That is self-regulated.
Rob Cunningham is with the Canadian Cancer Society.
We need to protect youth with solid legislative measures, not just claims from the tobacco industry.
Health Canada has now issued a public advisory warning about the misuse of nicotine pouches. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Antony Blinken is in Egypt this morning. U.S. Secretary of State has already met with Egypt's president in Cairo. The U.S. State Department says the two discussed negotiations to secure a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The plan calls for a pause of at least 6 weeks in the war and the release of all hostages. This is Blinken's sixth tour to the region since October 7th. He will travel to Israel tomorrow. Blinken says the gaps are narrowing. The United States, Egypt, and Qatar have spent several weeks trying to get a deal. Methane coming out of landfills is a big problem for climate change, and the Canadian government is trying to regulate that. But right now, we do not know exactly how much methane is being released by Canada's landfills. Enter a research team from St. Francis Xavier University in Nova Scotia. Shayna Luck joined them in their mobile lab.
This is what a plume looks like. See, like everything went flat.
Nadia Taraki is driving in a disused landfill outside Halifax and following blips on her laptop hooked up to sensitive gas monitoring equipment. She's looking for signs of an otherwise invisible, odorless gas, methane. Canada plans to regulate landfill methane. It's the country's third biggest emitter after oil and gas extraction and agricultural sources. But we only have estimates. That's why Taraki's team Flux Lab from St. Francis Xavier University is taking exact measurements. Funded by 2 federal agencies and the United Nations, they visited 145 landfills from Vancouver Island to St. John's. Dave Risk is their team leader.
Landfill operators will be spending money on mitigation and installing capture systems. Then we need to know that their investments are for the right reasons and will make a difference.
Landfills lock in methane emissions for decades.
This landfill is still emitting, and it's been closed for 25 years, and it will keep emitting for probably another 75 years.
Some modern landfills capture methane and burn it off. Some even put trash back to use by generating electricity from the burning methane. Climate policy expert Jennifer Winters says regulations need to be standardized across the country.
It's fairly simple. Let's put in a gas capture system, let's monitor, and let's prioritize capture for use.
The federal government's regulations on landfill methane are due to be published later this year. Shayna Lux, CBC News, Halifax.
And speaking of landfills, the United Nations is warning the world is on pace to produce 82 million tons of electronic waste by 2030. That is 82 million tons of old cell phones, laptops, TVs, and e-cigarettes. Kees Balde is a co-author of the UN's new report.
To date, only 22.3% of e-waste has been collected and recycled in a good way for the environment. So the vast majority of e-waste is not managed in a correct manner.
E-waste often contains toxic or hazardous substances, including mercury. Experts say part of the problem is our increased consumption. The report also calls on companies to start making electronics with longer life cycles. Quebecers will get their chance to pay their respects to Brian Mulroney today in his home province. Mulroney's casket will lie in repose at St. Patrick's Basilica in Montreal today and tomorrow. Dignitaries will get the chance to visit first, then the public will get their turn beginning at noon Eastern. Mulroney was born in Baie-Comeau, a city northeast of Quebec City. His funeral will take place this Saturday at Montreal's Notre Dame Basilica. You can listen to coverage of the funeral here on CBC Radio 1 beginning at 11:30 Atlantic, noon in Newfoundland, 10:30 Eastern. The Manitoba legislature is preparing to issue an apology today. The recipients are 2 men switched at birth nearly 70 years ago. Karen Pauls has the story from Winnipeg.
The age we are now, there's a lot of years that have been lost and that you'll never get back, eh?
Eddie Ambrose, now of Winnipeg, and Richard Beauvais of Seashelt, BC, were born on the same day at a small Manitoba hospital in 1955. 2 years ago, they discovered through a DNA test that they'd been raised by each other's biological families. Beauvais grew up in a Métis community and is a residential day school survivor who was taken from his family during the 60s scoop. Ambrose was raised Ukrainian. He recently got his Métis citizenship.
To actually see him in person, it's a whole different feeling of someone because he is there in the flesh in front of you. The features of my father, which is his father, you can see it in him, and the features in Mom. It's there, you can see.
Bill Gange is their lawyer. He says today's apology in the Manitoba legislature is important.
An acknowledgement that a mistake was made.
But he's fighting for more.
My hope is that we're going to be able to work out a compensation package.
As for Ambrose and Beauvais, they're spending the week getting to know each other.
You know, we just need to learn and listen from each other. You tell our stories as how we grew up.
And find a way to reclaim their lives. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Hi, this is Kurt Kiesman from the Ashern Auction Mart, and you're listening to Information Radio.
Good morning. We're live in Ashern, Manitoba this morning at the Auction Mart, learning all about how the farming community is one of the big economic engines in this part of Manitoba. Stay tuned. This is Communities in Focus. That was my self-taping yesterday morning, sitting up in the stands at the Auction Mart in Ashern. That's where we're broadcasting from this morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Right now we're at the Chicken Chef on the main street, getting ready for a big full show as we look at this part of the Interlake. I'll be on taking you to the cattle auction in Ashern and hearing how it's the only co-op cattle mart and auction in all of Manitoba. We're also going to have a story this hour about music in the West Interlake, specifically a couple from Ericsdale that started a music festival to honor their late friends. It's now expanded into a 3-day festival with camping. We're going to hear their story coming up. Stay with us. All of that and more is Communities in Focus, broadcast on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you so much to the West Interlake for the hospitality and having us out here in this part of Manitoba. Ashern, of course, last week we were in St. Laurent, which is an hour away from where we are this morning. Ashern's 2 hours on Lake Manitoba. It's about 2 hours from Winnipeg, northwest, and still on the shores in the West Interlake, which is, of course, between, well, the lakes, between Lake Winnipeg and between Lake Manitoba. And what a wonderful part of the province is with a diversified economy. You're going to find cottagers and seasonal residents alongside people who live here year-round, and farm and ranch. There's cattle and horses and a very big landscape. And of course, then this week we're also looking at a community that has, in the arm of the West Interlake, has 2 towns. So Ashern, about 700 people. Ericsdale up the way, about 400 people. So we have lots of stories to share here as Communities in Focus is proud to be here with CBC. Right now, though, we are also keeping tabs always on what's happening and making news in Winnipeg. So to get the stories from there, Heather Wells joins us with headlines.
Good morning. Well, an apology, 68 years in the making. Premier Rob Canoe today will apologize on behalf of the province to Edward Ambrose and Richard Beauvais. The lawyer for the 2 men who were switched at birth says he wants the Manitoba government to give them fair compensation. The 2 men were born at the same hospital in Arborg and taken home by the other's biological parents. Domo Gas says it is pulling out all the stops to keep gas flowing to its customers. Imperial Oil, as we've been telling you all week, shut down its pipeline from Gretna to Winnipeg on Friday after a strain was found on a portion of the line. Graham Carlisle at Domo's headquarters in Winnipeg says they had a close call earlier this week. The Domo on Donald came close to running dry, but Carlisle says supply arrived just in time. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather. Abby Adeyemi is back in studio and very busy directing the show this morning and covering weather and traffic. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning, Marcy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. You know, I haven't been up in this part of Manitoba for any length of time since really covering the floods in 2011, where I spent extensive time around the lake. And it's just really great to be back. It's a reminder of how busy it is. Ashern Chicken Chef's on the main street here in Ashern, literally right off of Highway 6. And I tell you, yesterday we were spending time here gathering, checking our signals, and of course editing, meeting folks. This place was hopping all day long with buses coming in and out off the highway, students, lots of, different First Nations communities that are around here. So, yeah, it's been wonderful to be here. Speaking of the highways, how are things at home for weather and traffic?
For weather, as we wake up this morning, it's chilly at -12 outside with clear skies. But remember to bundle up and stay warm as you step out today. Throughout the day, we're expecting a mix of sun and clouds with temperatures gradually rising to a high of -5 degrees. However, you need to be prepared for a beat of breeze as the wind chill value may feel even colder because right now it's actually feeling like -24 in the city. But tonight we should anticipate partly cloudy skies and then the temperatures will be dropping to around -14. Looking at traffic, it's a bit quiet for now, but we don't know what it's going to look like later. If you see anything, let us know. 788-3093.
Well, as I've mentioned, Highway 6 is the main thoroughfare for this part of Manitoba in the West Interlake. And 20 minutes south of here up Highway 6 is Ericsdale. And there's a couple breathing new life into their community. They've set up shop in the long vacant Big Al's building where they sell music tools. There's a pottery shop in the back. And they started something new. It's called the Roger Kimley Music Festival. They started it back in 2020 as a way to honor their 3 friends who passed away. Now, the festival started out as a small one, but it's now expanded. It's 3 days of music and camping. Derek McCandles and Don Mills is the couple that I'm talking about, and they're the ones behind all of this. CBC's Bryce Hoey has been up in this area with our team and Communities in Focus, and he had a chance to sit down with Derek and Don in their music shop to talk about how this festival started.
Dawn, you were just mentioning the music festival. Mm-hmm. Can you just tell me how that came to be and what you got planned this coming year?
The first year that we were here, 3 of Derek's really good friends had died during that time. And we gathered some friends from Winnipeg and some local people and put on a weekend. Lovely music, lovely food, lovely companionship, and it was just a great experience.
Yeah.
And we thought, yeah, okay, here we go, let's be doing this. And then we had, every year we pick up a little more momentum, we get a few more great people on board that are really keen and to share their skills and enthusiasm, and it just keeps growing. And so this year we're going into our 4th year. And it's a big move for us. We had been doing things in town at the local park, making it available for everybody to come to, and evening concerts in the hall. We've got a really sweet hall. Mm-hmm. And we're moving over to the Ericsdale Sports Grounds. So it'll be full, camping. All the events will be there from Friday through Sunday afternoon. And we've got a great dance band on Saturday night, The Solutions, and other really great acts. Sweet Alibi. J.D. Edwards.
Yeah.
That's going to be a fun show.
Yeah.
Derek, when Dawn was kind of talking about sort of the origin story of this, she mentioned 3 people, 3 friends of yours, and I noticed you took a bit of a deep breath.
Well, yeah.
Can you tell me about them?
Roger Young was we were just good friends. Motorcycle. I wasn't as much of a motorcycle enthusiast as he was. He'd be out right now, and not a problem.
50 years of riding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I met them just kind of, I went to do some sound somewhere, and then that's where I met them. And the boys have kind of grown up since then. They have their own band now and everything. But Roger was we were just great pals. And he passed away on his motorcycle, like he said he wanted to pass away. And another buddy of mine, Lee Reniak, and he was a jammer. He invented and created jams all over Winnipeg, and he would encourage people. He was a musician himself, but didn't play very much, but he would encourage everybody to play. And then Kim Russell, he's a brother to the Russells, the Guess Who Russells. There was a problem with drugs, and he never did recover from that. And so, again, same old story, stay away from them. Because he just couldn't at 63 was he? Yeah.
So all 3 of these friends passed away in some short time span.
Yes.
You lost all 3 of them. That must have been incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
During the pandemic.
Yeah. So that was a heart-wrenching year.
What's the conversation where you decide maybe we should do something with this grief to honor these men?
Well, I think it was a conversation with Roger's wife at the time, and she said, we're trying to get people together, but with this pandemic, we can't do anything. And we said, well, we live in Ericsdale, so let's just do it. Everybody can camp, we'll do it outside, and man, did it pee down rain.
Yeah,
it was
a challenging weekend.
It was a challenging weekend, but with the stage, local guy Jerry Saunders pulled his stage in here. We played all weekend in the rain. Everybody camped. At one point, this floor was littered with people, and we were cooking sausages and eggs and what have you. And we just fed everybody, and it was just a great weekend. Yeah. It was just, and then at the end of that, that Sunday, we just said, that's it. We got to do this. I mean,
that's the spirit that we are looking to encourage in people getting together.
Yeah. And they couldn't do anything, they couldn't do anything for Kim as well.
Yeah.
And they couldn't do anything for Lee. So we were just like, okay, this is all going to happen in one weekend. We're just going to, yeah.
From what I understand, people are taking notice of this, that there was some sort of shout out during question period last week from your local MLA, Derek Johnson. What was it like to know that you're not just obviously kind of making inroads here in this community, but that word is getting out and people are starting to recognize the impact that you two are having and trying to breathe life into this community?
It's so encouraging, isn't it? Because sometimes it feels like we're in a bit of a desert, but that was really encouraging. So somehow things are coming together a bit more.
Yeah, and we were getting more, like this year particularly, we're getting more people on board to volunteer and be on committees, and we have, it's just a very encouraging year this year.
People around here know how to volunteer. They're good at it. And that's almost becoming a bit of a dying art. We need to really be encouraging our young people, which is part of what also we want to do. And collective we, because it is really a group of all of us.
Yeah.
And musicians, more musicians are coming out, more artisans are being interested to be part of it. Dana, Joe, and I are keen on the Makers Market as another artistic adjunct to the festival. Lots of people come for that as well.
We're in a great position because musicians and bands are calling us now.
Yeah.
We're not out there looking. They're calling us, and we have enough. We already have enough for this year, but we could already take that group and already have a festival for next year set up. So.
That is a conversation that Bryce Hoy had with Derek McCandles and Don Mills about the Roger Kimley Music Festival. So that is happening later this summer from August 16th to the 18th in this neck of the woods in Ericsdale. For more information on tickets and lineup, go to rogerkimleymusicfest.com. And you are probably wondering, are you going to play some music? Well, absolutely. Bryce Hoy spoke with a couple in their shop, and Derek did play. So we've got an acoustic version of his tune. We're going to play that for you later as Communities in Focus continues from the West Interlake.
Your neighborhood, your community, your country, your world, your news that matters, news that belongs to you. Your World Tonight, every night, 7 days a week on CBC Radio 1, on demand on the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
6:23 a.m. and woo-wee, it's minus 19 in Ashburn this morning. In Winnipeg, it's minus 12. Winnipeg's going for a sunny day and a high of minus 5. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here in Communities in Focus. We are in the West Interlake in Ashburn, broadcasting at the Chicken Chef. So if you want to come down and see us, we'd love to see you. We've got a community breakfast planned for right after our show's off the air, and we have lots of stories coming up from this part of the province. But next, let's turn to the news of the day. The story about those two men switched at birth. Edward Ambrose and Richard Beauvais switched at birth at a hospital in Manitoba in 1955, as you've been hearing in the news both locally and nationally today. They finally met face-to-face this week on Tuesday. Now, the meeting is on the heels of Premier Wab Kinew, who is expected to apologize to the men in the Manitoba legislature later this afternoon. The two men were born at the same hospital in Arborg. They were taken home by each other's biological parents. Ambrose, as you've been hearing, thought he was Ukrainian most of his life. Beauvais was actually raised Métis, a community nearby where we're broadcasting from today, a community near Lake Manitoba. CBC's Karen Pauls sat down and spoke with Edward Ambrose yesterday about how he feels about today's upcoming apology.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. You got something like this. It's great to get an apology of what happened. The apology, it seemed to have been a very hard thing for someone to come out and give an apology. For what reasons, we don't know. We don't know. But some sort of a compensation for the apology. I really don't know what else I can say. Because I could be going over and over and over again, but it would be this, basically what I'm saying there. So.
Is it a step in the right direction to hear that the government's sorry for what happened to you?
It is to get an apology. To me, an apology is it's something that is very, very truthful. But if it's someone that really doesn't know what the family has gone through, that's a different apology. But we can expect to get, I guess, what we expect, right? For an apology. So if you're going to go to a friend's place and if something was done wrong, you have to make an apology for something, even though even if something that was not happened in that type of manner, in some type of way. But and they looking forward, the apology would be nice, and it would be nice for the apology if family would be there to actually hear an apology. If it's just me and Richard, it's an apology just for the two of us. But I don't think everyone can be there for an apology,
Well, and it has, like you said earlier, it has ripple effects, I guess. What
Yeah.
was it like to meet him for the first time?
Well, when you see him in pictures, I guess that's easy, but to actually see him in person, it's a whole different feeling of someone because he is there in the flesh in front of you, and you get to give a hug or thing like that, which is it means an awful lot for someone who is me and he is vice versa type thing.
Do you see your family in his features, in his face?
Mom and Dad Ambrose, my family that I grew up with, the features of my father, which is his father, you can see it in him. The facial features and the features in Mom, it's there. You can see.
That must be bittersweet because they're not here anymore.
No. And it's just to think of something like this that had happened for both sides of our family, or the parents. How they would have felt if something like this had happened. Like, what kind of emotions would have gone through, something like this. And again, I guess we can only think ourselves of what the emotions would have been,
So many lost opportunities, hey?
Yeah. So in order for someone to truly apologize something like this, it's a great deal more, But as all we can accept is what we will be given for an apology. Me meeting Richard for the first time, that's what I'm, kind of point towards, between the families and how we feel towards it, So.
I'm sure there's a lot going on. Was yesterday the first time you met him in person?
This was the first time, yeah. Other than pictures or on the phone. It's a time that was lost. You will never get that back.
Edward Ambrose speaking with CBC's Karen Pauls. He and Richard Beauvais were switched at birth in 1955. The Premier expected to apologize today. Their lawyer said the men would also like a compensation package for the 68 years they spent without their biological families. We'll have ongoing coverage in the news. Speaking of which, the news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's minus 12 right now. Nice sunshine will get you going this morning, but a few afternoon clouds will roll in. Today's high is minus 5. Domo Gas says it is pulling out all the stops to keep gas flowing to customers. Imperial Oil shut its pipeline from Gretna to Winnipeg down on Friday after a strain was identified on a portion of the line. The company says repairs will take about 3 months. Graham Carlisle at Domo's Western Canada headquarters in Winnipeg says they had a close call earlier this week. The Domo on Donald came close to running dry, but Carlisle says supply arrived in time.
Like everyone, we're just working hard to bring product in by truck and by rail, and just trying to do our best to stay open and service our customers as usual.
Carlisle says they're working to bring product in by truck. They have to drive further to get it. Gretna, Regina, and Saskatoon. And he says it stands to reason that additional cost may be at one point reflected in the price of the pumps. A British Columbia man who lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in an investment fraud is thankful he was able to get his money back. He credits the recovery to the actions taken in a Winnipeg fraud case that happened around the same time. Alan Landa in Vancouver was devastated when he learned a fraudster had taken more than $700,000 he sent by wire transfer to what he thought would be a safe investment.
I couldn't believe that I blew my nest egg. I just honestly, I wanted to curl up into a little ball and never be seen again.
The bank put a freeze on the account where Landa's money was received by the alleged fraud. He filed a lawsuit and got a court order to recover the $735,000 he had invested for his business. It happened at the end of 2022. The same company was involved in both cases. A local organization hopes to address the root causes behind trauma and hurt faced by some children in care. Knowles Centre is a nonprofit social services agency where kids can learn about their Indigenous heritage. They learn to drum and to take part in pipe ceremonies. Indigenous Inclusion Coordinator Kara Widrick says many in care struggle with their identity.
It's important for them to know who they are, where they come from, because that's your base of your identity to build your gifts and your abilities and your purpose in life. And if that piece is missing for you and you have to go the extra mile to seek it out and nobody has the answers for you, that causes a lot of disconnect within yourself.
More than 80% of children at Knowles Centre identify as Indigenous. Some Palestinian Canadians confronted Canada's immigration minister last night.
We've been asking them to do a program to evacuate our families.
Bisan Khalaf is trying to get 15 of her relatives from Gaza to Canada. In January, the Canadian government started a temporary program for extended family of Palestinian Canadians to move here from Gaza, but so far, none have arrived. Immigration Minister Mark Miller says he understands the frustration, but cannot publicly disclose diplomatic discussions. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. Winnipeg City Council has approved its 2024 budget. The operating budget passed yesterday with 14 votes in support and 1 against. The capital budget also passed 13-2. Minarski councillor Ross Eady voted for the budget for the first time in his 14 years on council. The budget includes a 3.5% property tax increase. Some services funded in this year's budget include an overall increase to library hours, although the Millennium Library will now close on Sundays. 2 of 3 swimming pools, which had been slated to close, will now stay open longer, although Happyland Outdoor Pool will likely not reopen. Brandon city planners are working to debunk rumors about what's behind the city's 30-year plan. The plan maps out how Brandon can grow by 10,000 residents in the coming decades. Last year, verbally aggressive residents derailed the city plan meetings for months. Sona Keely Tembo is the city's principal planner. She says they're happy to talk and respond to residents' concerns with education and empathy.
Our role really is to empathize. Cost of living has gone up. Potholes are horrible right now. So people are coming in, they have these tensions already. We're going to empathize. We're going to empathize and say, yes, we're all experiencing that cost of living, some definitely more than others, but bring it back to the topic at hand, which in this case is this long-term vision.
The city plan in Brandon is expected to appear before City Council in about a month. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, I have to say, Abby Adeyemi, we had a great drive here. So we actually have been driving around the area, Ericsdale, the Narrows. This morning we're broadcasting live from Ashern, Manitoba. And so we drove from the Narrows here this morning, just about a half-hour drive. And I was really grateful that we didn't have that icy, snowy, it's the trade-off. When it's colder out, you get nice, clear, crisp roads and no trouble. And I'll tell you, it is chilly. Here in Ashern, it's minus 19. What's the forecast looking like across Manitoba today?
Definitely. Starting from that Interlake region, I'll tell you it's partly cloudy over there, though some clearing will be happening soon. As you mentioned, the Interlake region is seeing a minus 19. But today will start sunny for folks in that region. Expect that transition into a mix of sun and clouds later, and then you'll be seeing a high of minus 7. The morning, it's kind of chilly, like Marcy mentioned. It's feeling like minus 22 if you step outside. So you need to watch out for frostbite. It's going to be something you need to take into consideration. Gimli is currently at minus 18. Coming to Winnipeg, it's brisk at minus 12. Brandon is at minus 15. Thompson is at minus 29 with clear skies, though there's a risk of frostbite and minutes also advised over there. And further north, Churchill is at minus 29 with ice crystals. Dauphin is at minus 18. Steinbach minus 15 and Morris at minus 12. Just something to mention for commuters out there. The annual winter route parking ban has been lifted for the season. So you may resume parking overnight on designated winter routes for people, for Winnipeggers that always want to do the street parking. Just something, a heads up for you there. You see anything in traffic? Let us know. 788-3093.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
Well, we are here at the heart of Main Street in Ashern, and it is a quaint place full of businesses, and a lot of them look like they've been here for many years. So you've got a post office, we're in the Chicken Chef. You've also got a quilt shop up the way. There's a dollar store. There's a couple of grocery stores in this community, and it was just hopping yesterday. Well, speaking of businesses, Chrisley Ramlakan is here with our business news and report next. Hi there.
Hi. Hello, Marcy.
So we are getting some insight today into when the Bank of Canada could cut interest rates. What do we know about it?
Yeah, that's right. So the central bank expects it will be able to begin cutting interest rates sometime this year, but officials are split on the timing. So that's according to the bank's summary of deliberations that led up to the March 6th interest rate announcement. Now, while members of the governing council agreed on the conditions to start lowering its policy rate, they want to see further and sustained easing in the bundle of indicators they call underlying inflation. They had varying views on when those conditions will be met. Yesterday, the U.S. Federal Reserve also held its key interest rate unchanged for the 5th meeting in a row. And officials there signaled they still expect to cut rates 3 times this year, despite sticky inflation. Yet they foresee fewer rate cuts next year. So for more on all of this, here's Barry Schwartz, who is the Chief Investment Officer at Baskin Wealth Management.
The only problem with the Bank of Canada is it doesn't really want to act too quickly until they get a better indication. The U.S. is also going to cut interest rates. They probably want to synchronize their rate cuts because if we cut too quickly here in Canada, we may lead to a plummeting of the Canadian dollar, which means we just import more inflation. I think they're probably waiting to the summer, both Bank of Canada and Federal Reserve, to get the clear indication that inflation is still dropping and not trending higher. And then they may start to act on those expected rate cuts.
But Governor Tiff Macklem has suggested that the central bank will not cut interest rates at the pace it raised them. And Marcy, the next interest rate announcement is scheduled for April 10th.
Well, as you have been hearing, I'm in Ashern this morning with our team from CBC Manitoba Communities in Focus, Crystalie, and that has meant road snacks. So my belly is full of mini eggs. We had local Saskatoon pie delivered to us, which was amazing last night. Thank you, Dwayne, from West Interlake here. As well, I've got some chips in there. But the other thing that showed up yesterday was cookies. And you have a story this morning about how a really popular classic cookie is changing their recipe.
Yes, that's right. So, with more choices than ever on the market and obviously, homemade cookies, which are competition, Chips Ahoy is trying to bolster its brand of chocolate chip cookies, which has been around for 60 years. So there's going to be a new package, a new recipe, and a new contest where consumers can win a trip to a luxury Malibu beach house. So the cookies will look and feel the same, but the chocolate chips will contain a higher cocoa content and Madagascar vanilla extract, giving them a richer and creamier flavor, the company says. Now, the company says it's the biggest update in nearly a decade, and that the new recipe took more than 4 years of work. And but the company says the price is going to stay the same. So we'll have to watch and make sure that still happens. And, the business may be looking for younger customers as well. Gen Z shoppers allocate more of their spending to food and beverages than other categories like apparel or electronics.
What are markets telling us today?
So in Europe, markets are higher, with investors keeping an eye on the latest monetary policy decisions from the Bank of England and the Swiss National Bank. Germany, the UK are both up, France is down, and Asia markets are climbing, and Japan stocks closed at fresh all-time highs. Japan is up, Shanghai is down, Hong Kong is up. Oil is down 16 cents to 81.10 US per barrel. Gold is up at 51.20 to $2,212.10 US per ounce, and the dollar's just slightly down 0.01 of a cent to 74.11 cents US.
All right, Crystalie, thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
Crystalie Ramlacam with Business News. 6:42 a.m. is the time right now on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app, or this morning online. Thanks so much for joining us. This is Communities in Focus, and I'm Marcy Marcusa out on the road this morning. Minus 19 here in Ashern, where we are today. Still ahead in this half hour, we're going to take you to a cattle auction. Wednesday's a big day out in these parts because at the Ashern Auction Mart, producers come and basically they go for their once-a-year payday, right? You raise those cattle, you go, you see if you're going to be able to sell them off after all your work. And a lot of people out this way are talking about the weather right now because those that are still on the land are actually in calving season right now. And man, if we're whining about the temperature dipping in the city of Winnipeg, just imagine being out here in the West Interlake, going out to those cattle barns and having to be doing that round the clock when it's an icy morning like it is today. So as mentioned, minus 19. In Winnipeg, it's minus 12 right now, and today's daytime high in the city is going to be minus 5. Well, next on the program, as you likely know, former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney has been lying in repose in Montreal ahead of a state funeral that's planned for Saturday. All week, there have been tributes to a politician who befriended many, and more than most people are saying kept his politics civil. Nelson Wiseman's here to reflect on that. He's Professor Emeritus in Political Science at University of Toronto. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So what is your sense of the civility of Brian Mulroney? Are people waxing poetic and not remembering, more divisiveness? Or is there something about the time he did politics where people were more civil despite their, different views?
I think all those things are involved. I mean, we've got to differentiate the person from the times. And in terms as a person, well, he was quite civil. I mean, in his personal relations, he was a transactional politician, so he reached out to people. He, if there was a milestone in your life, a wedding, a birth, a death, a 50th wedding anniversary, he'd send a card or make a call. That was quite unlike his predecessor, Pierre Trudeau, who was quite cold and aloof and detached and very reserved. But we can also talk about the time. I mean, the senior Trudeau, Pierre, arose in a context of the 60s and the counterculture. By the 80s, when Mulroney came into power, we were now entering a different world. China was opening up, globalization was coming, and trade with the United States became a vital issue in terms of protecting Canada's economic interests. And there was also the rise of Quebec and the potential of separation. So the issues were different, the people were different, and also media started to change. I mean, and today, so when we talk about civility, one of the reasons we think of that era as being more civil is because we didn't have the social media we have of today, which is very divisive.
Sorry, Nelson, I know there's a delay. I'm on location, so I just want to interject on that point around social media. So what I'm wondering, and this is an interesting thing as I'm watching it, because this was before social media, the internet, I mean, really was only publicly available in 1993. That's the year he left office. Does the possibility to do politics in a different way still exist today, given the fact that we do all communicate differently, we assess each other differently, politicians are held to a standard where people look at them and want to know everything about, their value system for better or worse? Is it even possible to go back to politics in a different way, do you think?
It probably isn't. However, in a time of what I would call existential crisis, when really everybody agrees that the crisis is so monumental, those things, those kinds of petty and partisan divisions start to fall off. For example, like the situation in Canada we had during the Second World War. But hopefully we don't get anything like that. But it's in those times that you do have more reasoning and not an attempt to just gain advantage by using a wedge. But that's unlikely in a more normal era as we are in today, because when you mention social media, well, the genie is out of the bottle and you can't put it back in. And it is true that the internet started in 1993, but at that time it was essentially email and quite passive, and people thought the possibilities were positive. It was long after that we got Facebook, and now we have TikTok, which is just something of the last few years. And I think the pandemic also reinforced a lot of this. It separated people and so there was less human contact.
Thank you very much, Nelson. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Marcy.
Nelson Wiseman, Professor Emeritus in Political Science at the University of Toronto. Former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, the funeral is coming up, state funeral on Saturday. It is right now 6:47 a.m. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and we're here with a team out in Communities in Focus, CBC in the West Interlake. We're live in Ashern at the Chicken Chef, and later this morning we have a number of stories coming up. Now, speaking, though, of focusing on this area of the province, up next on the show.
3, 2, 5. All right, I'm going to be in it. I'm going to be in it. Sometimes the ring going to be weighing 860 pounds. I'm going to be right here.
Wednesdays are big days for many people here in the Interlake. Since 1957, the co-op Ashern Auction Mart, the only co-op in Manitoba, has been helping cattle producers from all over this region buy and sell their cattle. So Corey Funk and I were there yesterday morning for a visit. We went on down early, first thing in the morning, as producers were waiting to see if their once-a-year payday, so to speak, would pay off. And Corey's here at Chicken Chef with us this morning, and quite the production there, Corey, right?
Yeah, it really was. When we pulled in, you kind of see this huge building just south of town, and if you just for listeners, you picture this. Essentially, it's this big stable with an auction house attached to it. And I don't know about you, Marcy, but when we pulled up, I fully expected to walk right into the auction center, but we actually, interesting, you walk actually into the kitchen and the canteen area first, which was bumping full of people. It was lovely. And we walked and we were a bit lost, so a woman from the kitchen took pity on us and showed us into the auction area, which looks actually a lot like a theater. It has these raised red and white bleacher seats. The front seats were occupied by these very busy looking buyers. They got these phones in front of them, laser focused on the cattle.
And it was interesting about that front row of 12 people sitting there. There was about 8 rows up behind us, like a theater, as you said. I thought they would be yelling and raising signs, but there was a lot of money passing hands, serious business with just a gesture.
Yeah, that's all it really was. It is very subtle when you're watching them. It's really interesting to see. So there's these cattle that come out, they're released onto this massive scale in front of the buyers, and it's not surprising that they are that laser focused, right? Because some of those buyers are going to be spending up hundreds of thousands of dollars that day, which is quite wild to see. Pretty high stakes situation there. Kurt Kiesman, the manager of the Ashern Auction Mart, was also sitting in the stands, and he told me just how many cattle they sell on a given Wednesday.
About 100, 150 cows and about 1,000 to 1,500 feeders.
And feeders, what do you mean by feeders?
Calves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So not slaughter cows and the calves and the yearlings. So.
And how long have you been doing this for?
Since 2011. So came back from Alberta, bought a farm and started managing here. So.
And how big is the cattle industry in this area right now? How important is the cattle industry to Ashern and the surrounding area?
I think it's one of the bigger income streams in our area. It took quite a hit in the drought a couple of years ago, and BSE before that. But it's a resilient group of people in this area, and the cattle that we're at right now, it's kind of flatlined. This is kind of where it's been now for a few years. So the people that are in have stayed in, and they're being rewarded right now with the high prices. So.
Okay, so it's a good thing to be a rancher right now, would you say?
Well, it's a lot better than it was 3 years ago for sure. So yeah, the prices have definitely increased in the last 2 years.
Well, that's good news. Looking ahead, though, I know there's talks of some potential drought. I know there's been some, it's been a dry winter. What's the vibe like here looking ahead for cattle producers in the area?
I think this area is a little bit more optimistic. We had more snowfall, and when you drive around, we're a lot more fortunate than some. So we'll probably start spring okay, and then we'll just need some timely rains and get the grass going and the crops in. So we're a lot better off than some places, which is good. I'm pretty happy that our area generated like 25 million more than last year on the livestock. So it's good that there'll be a little bit more stimulus going into the community than what there's been in the last couple of years, because it's been a tough grind up till last year. So I'm hoping a few good years will come, and it should be a good time for farmers.
How busy is this place these days compared to before the drought?
It's definitely a lot smaller than it was before the drought. So after BSC, we were running like 70, 80,000 head through a year. Now we'd be 45 to 50,000.
Okay. And when people come here to sell stuff, I imagine kind of like any gathering place, it's a place obviously to come sell their cows, but it must also be a little bit of like a networking thing as well, hey?
Yeah, like sometimes it feels like that coffee shop mentality in the kitchen. So people come to visit and sit down and chat with neighbors and find out all the rumors and gossip in the community. So it works good that way. And then when guys are selling, it's usually the highlight for the year when they're selling and making money off all the hard work they've done. So no, it's been good. So
do people come just to hang out in the kitchen?
Yeah, the food's good. So yeah, you don't lose weight here eating in our kitchen. So yeah, no, there's definitely some people that are here all the time that don't farm. So.
Just come and hang out.
Just come and eat. Yeah, eat and visit. So yeah.
And I guess if people are kind of wondering what is so right to the right of us here, there's cows kind of going through. Can you just set the scene for us, what's happening right here?
Yeah, so cattle come in from our left side, and they come in on the ring and they get weighed, and then it gives the opportunity for the buyers to look at them. And the auctioneer's chanting right now, but so he sells them off by the pound, and then they go off and they get penned and put on feed. So that's pretty much how they go, and then the pounds are multiplied per dollars per pound, and then that's what the amount they bring. So
okay, it looks like a little bit of a theater vibe in here, right? Is this so? I'm looking. Maybe I see about a couple dozen people in here watching the cows, looking to buy or sell cows. Is it usually this kind of few dozen people? Because look, there's enough seating for probably at least almost 100 people or so, hey?
Yeah, they're seating for about 150 right now in the regular sale. The front row is our buyers, and then usually spectators are in the stands, and people that are selling their cattle. Later on, we'll have a bred cow sale today, and the stands should be packed with people. So yeah,
so people come to just watch.
People come just to watch, see how everyone's doing, see where the market's at for when they sell. And, it's good to take a look at cattle that are representative of yours so you have an idea what they'll bring. So.
Are you optimistic with the future of the cattle industry? I know a lot of people, there's concerns just in agriculture in general about, maybe young farmers not necessarily want to take over their parents' farms, things like that. What does the future kind of look like for cattle farming in the area here?
I think it's going to be tough for young people to get in. I hope they do. But, with the higher cattle prices and higher land prices and higher equipment costs, it's definitely going to be tough to get in. But I hope guys try and farmers will help other farmers out when they're starting, I find. So if you're young, you need help to get started. So it's a good thing that, the community is pretty close. So, yeah.
And what do you love about being a cattle producer? Like, you moved here from Alberta, right? Were you doing that there too, or what?
My family was originally from here, so I moved back. So I met my wife in Alberta and then came back to Manitoba. So some days she wonders why we came back, but it's good. So we're farming on some of my uncle's land, and then we rent some of our land that was, homesteaded 100 and some years ago. So, yeah, so it's been in the family for a while. That's kind of the biggest reason we came back. So.
And what do you love about doing this?
I'm not sure. We're calving right now, so calving is the time of the year when you're wondering why you're farming. But when we sell the calves, it'll make sense. But right now, not enough sleep, and it's cold right now. So
I guess a calf could just come at any time, and all of a sudden you're up. You just got to deliver it, eh?
That's right. Yeah. Like right now, my mom and my wife are huge. While I'm at the mart, they're doing all the checks at home, and then they call me if it gets ugly. So then I go over there and deal with the problems. So. But yeah, the weather next couple of days will be a little bit hairy, and then it's going to go back into nice weather. So it's been a good calving season so far. So, but still, you're up all night. So
all night, cold, wet hands, probably.
Yeah, cold, wet hands, and then when you get out there, the calf's cold and the cow's chasing. It makes for a long night. So.
Kirk Kiesman, a manager at Ashern Auction Mart, who also farms cattle in the area, as you heard, speaking there with CBC's Corey Funk. We were at that auction mart yesterday morning out here in Ashern. We're talking about the way of life here. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about the West Interlake overall as we focus on the communities of Ericsdale, Ashern, and all those in between. This is Communities in Focus on CBC Manitoba. Great to be here in this part of the province. So coming up, we have lots more stories. Stay with us. Right now, though, let's go to the stories making news today across the province. Heather Wells is here with headlines at 7:03.
An apology 68 years in the making. Premier Rob Canoe will apologize on behalf of the province to Edward Ambrose and Richard Beauvais later today. The lawyer for the two men who were switched at birth says he wants the Manitoba government to give them fair compensation. The two men were born at the same hospital in Arborg, but were taken home by the other's biological parents. Ambrose and Beauvais met in person for the first time earlier this week. Winnipeg City Council has approved its budget. It goes from 2024 to 2027, and it passed yesterday the operating budget with 14 votes in support, just one against. The capital budget also passed 13-2. Menarski councillor Ross Eady voted in favor of this budget for the first time in his 14 years on council. Our next local news coming up at 7:30.
-12 in Winnipeg, -19 in Ashern. Traffic moving well. 788-3093 if you need us. Now, coming up after 7. From the big lake to the backwoods, we're going to take you inside the story of a creepy cabin near the community of Ericsdale, where a fugitive from Stony Mountain hid out for 10 months back in 1960. The story of Percy Moggy is coming up. Also, on a much less ominous note, as you may have been hearing in the news this week, some nurses from the Philippines have now arrived in Manitoba. Some of them have laid down roots here in Ashern, working at the hospital there. We're going to talk to a healthcare worker who has laid the groundwork for them. He also came from the Philippines, but now 14 years ago, and boy, he loves this part of Manitoba. We're going to hear why in the next hour as our broadcast continues on Communities in Focus. And when he ran for Reeve, Art Jonassen said he didn't come from either of the two big towns of Ashern or Ericsdale, the bigger communities in this part of the province. So he said he ran on the fact that he thought he was a great choice to represent the whole West Interlake. It's now been 10 years since rural amalgamation out this way. He's going to be here to talk about the benefits and the challenges, but also what comes next when it comes to the growth of the West Interlake. This is Communities in Focus. We're live at Ashern at the Chicken Chef. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We'll continue our show after 8.
Today on The Current.
It always amazes us just how little we know about the ocean and the things that live in there.
Researchers around the world are working together to identify undiscovered species in the oceans. It's an urgent job. Some of the 2 million species underwater may disappear before they're ever identified. That's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Studies show people with family doctors live longer, healthier lives. But a survey out this morning suggests Canada is lagging behind its peers when it comes to accessing primary care. Health reporter Christine Burek has been speaking to family doctors. They worry the problem is only going to get worse.
Finding a family doctor is getting harder. The latest Commonwealth Fund survey shows in 10 countries, including New Zealand, Germany, and the UK, on average, 93% of adults have a doctor or place they usually go for medical care. In Canada, that number is 86%. Cheryl Chewy is with the Canadian Institute for Health Information, or CIHI.
The percentage of Canadians dropped from 93% in 2016 to 86% in 2023.
So why is Canada lagging behind other wealthy countries?
It's the government not making good decisions. The wealthier countries are spending 50% more on primary care than Canada is. And so
Dr. David Barber chairs the Ontario Medical Association section on family medicine. The new data also shows income matters. 93% of those earning $150,000 a year had a family doctor. Dr. Barber says that's not surprising.
Anybody with money can get a family doctor. If you're willing to spend, $2,000 a year, these are executive clinic practices. And why and how these exist is still beyond me.
Barber says simply funding team-based care would help existing family docs see more patients. Adding real investments cannot happen fast enough. This week, results from medical students choosing their future career paths revealed even fewer grads are interested in going into family medicine this year over last. Christine Burek, CBC News, Toronto.
Edmonton is experiencing a startling increase in the number of annual deaths among people who are unhoused. Data obtained by CBC shows 8 times as many people with no fixed address died last year compared to 2019. As Paige Parsons reports, advocates say a toxic drug supply and a lack of social supports are behind the deadly trend.
He never missed my birthday or Christmas. He always called me.
Despite a decades-long struggle with addiction, Lisa Meyer's brother, Chris Jonason, tried to stay in touch. But after his son died in 2021, he gave up.
I couldn't do a damn thing for him.
Jonason died of a drug overdose in a downtown Edmonton shelter last year. According to provincial data, the 51-year-old was one of 302 homeless people in the city who died. A shocking 8 times increase compared to 2019, when the death total was 37. Despite being much smaller, Edmonton had more deaths than Toronto in 2022.
From March 2020 to March 2023, I lost 1 in 7 of my patients.
Most of Edmonton doctor Cameron Barr's patients are homeless. He gets death notifications for them, sometimes multiple times a week.
There's a lot of grief that you have to push down because you have to keep working.
Most of Barr's patients die of drug poisoning. A toxic street drug supply means outreach teams are in a race to reverse overdoses, regularly arriving too late.
A lot of the times it is our teams that are finding them or discovering.
Tyler Gaida works with a homeless outreach agency. She's building a public map to show where homeless people have died in the city.
It becomes a lot less abstract when you can see that in your neighborhood.
Creating awareness and hopefully triggering intervention in an ongoing crisis. Gaida's agency counted 72 deaths in the first 78 days of this year. Paige Parsons, CBC News, Edmonton.
Canada's Immigration Department has issued temporary resident visas for 14 Palestinians to come to Canada, but none of them have made it here. Immigration Minister Mark Miller is calling the program a failure. But that's hardly enough to satisfy families with loved ones in Gaza. Rafi Boudjikanian has more.
What is the reason that Israel or Egypt has provided to the government?
NDP immigration critic Jenny Kwan questioning Minister Mark Miller at a parliamentary committee Wednesday.
If I was aware of that, I would not be able to provide you that information.
Since the start of a temporary program in January for extended family of Palestinian Canadians to move here from Gaza, none have arrived. Miller's department has issued visas for 14 people, but they got to Egypt through the Rafah crossing on their own.
Our family can die at any second.
Bisan Khalaf says she's trying to get 15 of her loved ones out of Gaza on the program. She and around 20 Palestinian Canadians were hoping to get answers from Miller at committee.
We don't want promises anymore.
Miller says he understands the frustrations from the families but cannot publicly disclose diplomatic discussions. He also says a recent NDP motion the Liberals backed in Parliament calling for a ban on future arms exports to Israel could anger their government and have consequences for asylum seekers. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
Montreal will get the chance today to pay respects to former Prime Minister and Quebecer Brian Mulroney. His casket was driven from Ottawa yesterday. Mulroney will lie in repose today and tomorrow in Montreal ahead of Saturday's state funeral. My World Report co-host John Northcott joins me with more. And John, what will happen today?
Marcia, starting at noon today at St. Patrick's Basilica, members of the public will be able to attend until 6 p.m. Eastern and sign books of condolences. Tomorrow as well, starting at 10 a.m. Then Saturday, the state funeral at Notre Dame. That ceremony, presided over by the Archbishop of Montreal, will include prayers, songs, and tributes, including musical performances from the Montreal Symphony Orchestra, the tenors, and even Mulroney's granddaughter. After the ceremony, there will be a 19-gun salute at the Old Port of Montreal.
And what more do we know about who will be there?
There will be the current and former prime ministers, ambassadors, and many who will deliver eulogies, including his daughter, Ontario Cabinet Minister Caroline Mulroney, former Quebec Premier Jean Charest, Quebec businessman Pierre-Carl Pelado, hockey legend Wayne Gretzky, and former U.S. Secretary of State James Baker, who will deliver a video message. Baker, who served under Ronald Reagan, said of Mulroney in a recent article in the Globe and Mail, quote, "With his characteristic upbeat nature, Mr. Mulroney upheld the interest of Canada with a bold vision."
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
My co-host John Northcott. You can listen to live coverage of Brian Mulroney's state funeral starting at 10:30 Eastern, 9:30 Central, 8:30 Mountain this Saturday morning, right here on CBC Radio 1 or on the CBC Listen app. The European Union is taking steps to end unpaid internships. Today, EU parliamentarians will vote on a directive to crack down on exploitative employers and bogus traineeships. Young people are celebrating the new measures, especially in Italy, which has one of the highest youth unemployment rates in Europe. Megan Williams brings us the story from Rome.
26-year-old Maria Chiara Petrassi hustles along a busy thoroughfare in the north of Rome on her way to her first paid job since she graduated from university 4 years ago, a short-term government contract.
So I've done 2 internships unpaid and other jobs unpaid.
Petrassi says working for free in your 20s and even 30s is the norm in Italy, not the exception, at least for career track jobs. A recent survey suggested almost 80% of young people take on at least one internship. Many businesses see those young people as a form of cheap or unpaid labor, a practice the EU wants to clamp down on with the new directive it's voting on today. In a country like Italy, with a youth unemployment rate of 22%, hundreds of thousands of educated young people have left the country, prompting politicians and policymakers to talk of a lost generation. Petrassi has thought about leaving too, after internships that were supposed to end in jobs didn't.
So I hope to be hired, but at the finish of the internship, it doesn't happen.
Critics, though, say the EU directive, which focuses on interns for young people who have finished their education, leaves out those still in school. Megan Williams, CBC News, Rome.
The Punjabi Canadian artists are hoping to make history at the Juno Awards this weekend. Brampton, Ontario-based rapper Shub is nominated for the Fan Choice Award, but he has some tough competition. The Weeknd, Tate McRae, and Charlotte Cardin are all in the running. This is the first time anyone from the Punjabi Canadian music scene has landed in the Fan Choice category, and he's not the only one. British Columbia-raised singer Karen Ojla is also nominated. It's not too late to vote. For you to pick a winner, you can vote on TikTok or junofanchoice.ca. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Magandang umaga. Good morning. My name is Ramsey and I am with CBC in Ashern. Welcome everyone to Ashern, one of my favorite places on earth.
And he is telling the truth. We're going to hear more from Ramsey coming up this hour on our show. Communities in Focus is in Ashern. In the West Interlake, we're focusing on Ashern, Ericsdale, all the communities in between here up Highway 6. I'm Marcy Marcusa on location on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app. That was of Ramsey, who is a nurse here in the community. And he surprises some of his regular Indigenous dialysis patients who come to this region for healthcare by learning to speak a little Soto. So we're going to hear his story. We're also going to hear how he feels about some new nurses from the Philippines who've now arrived in the province. He says he's looking forward to growing the community. Stay with us. This is Communities in Focus. Also, you want to make sure that you don't get in the shower for this one. Stay and turn up the radio because we're going to hear more about Ericsdale and some of the things that you can do around this part of the Interlake. Ericsdale has some really cool history, and we're going to hear more about a couple of the stories there and places that you might put on your list to visit, whether it's during spring break or whether it's something you're planning for a staycation here in Manitoba this summer. And to other news here from this part of the province, the Reeve, Art Jonassen will join us as well. He's going to talk more about the future of this part of the West Interlake when it comes to the growth of the economy, changes in healthcare that are coming down the pipe, and some promises that were made by the current government as well, and more. So that's all coming up as our special broadcast, Communities in Focus from Ashern, continues. Well, Heather Wells is here. We're still plugged into the news of the day, and back in Winnipeg, she has our headlines.
Good morning. Well, Domo Gas says it is pulling out all the stops to keep gas flowing to customers. Imperial Oil shut down part of the pipeline from Gretna to Winnipeg on Friday. Workers identifying a strain on that portion of the line near St. Adolphe. Graham Carlisle at Domo's Canadian headquarters, Western Canadian headquarters, says there was a close call earlier this week. The Domo on Donald came close to running dry. We're going to hear more about what happened there. And a BC man who lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in an investment fraud is thankful he was able to get his money back, and he credits the recovery to actions taken in a Winnipeg fraud case that happened around the same time. Our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thank you, Heather. Let's get into what's going on in weather and traffic. Abby Adeyemi's here with our forecast. I'll tell you, when we got up here in Ashern this morning, it is chilly, surprisingly so. It was minus 19 earlier. Abby, what's it like in Winnipeg?
Yeah, Winnipeg, we are currently at minus 12, chilly also under clear skies. For folks, you need to remember to keep yourself warm today because though we're expecting plenty of sunshine that's going to transition into a mix of sun and clouds later, the high for today will be reaching minus 5. However, the wind is something you need to take into consideration. It's going to feel even colder, so be prepared for a bit of breeze. The chill value actually feels like minus 24 at this moment. Now, Marcy mentioned the West Interlake, Ashern, Aberg, Hecla, and Fisher River. Today will be sunny for you and chilly. You'll be seeing a high of minus 6. Though with the wind chill, it actually also feels like minus 24, so you need to brace for that, Mercy. That's what I can tell you.
And what's up in traffic back home? Anything going on?
Traffic is kind of quiet now. It's just quiet outside. I guess maybe, as the morning progresses, we'll definitely get to see what the road conditions look like. But as of now, no reports of crash to report for you. But if you see anything, 788-3093.
Well, I'm kind of glad it's quiet. I was going to share with you, Abby, I'm kind of glad it's quiet because I have a story that I want to share that came in that's traffic related to the part of Manitoba we're in from the Interlake. I'm hoping that we're getting this photo up so people can see this. But if they can't, they can go to my Facebook page. It was sent in by Maureen Mack. Now, we're in Ashern, and I mentioned there's so many communities in this West Interlake. If you drive just about a half an hour and you're going west, you're going to find yourself in the Narrows. And it's called that because it's a narrow part of Lake Manitoba. And Maureen sent in a photo, and she said the hay ferry is something she wanted to talk about. That took vehicles across the water of the Narrows before the bridge was constructed in 1969. So today you can drive across this bridge that takes you apart that narrow part of Lake Manitoba. But she sent in the cool photo of the ferry. So if you never saw that ferry crossing, then you want to check that out. And it's showing sort of when the bridge was being built, and it just captures this moment in history. The ferry could carry 6 cars. It was built actually in Steep Rock, Manitoba, and it launched in the summer of 1954. So a lot of people actually are sending in a history because this part of the West Interlake has so many cool stories. And it also has, if you look up Interlake tourism, there's a list of like 33 different places that you can visit as you make your way around the lake and to the various different communities that are here. So let's focus on one of the stories, because one of the communities that you can visit here is one of the larger ones. I'm talking about Ericsdale. So Ericsdale is 20 minutes from Ashern, where we are this morning, and this is just up the highway south from where we are. But if you do visit Ericsdale, just outside of the community, you can visit a cabin in the woods. But this one comes with a story that is not so quaint. In 1960, Percy Moggy escaped from Stony Mountain Penitentiary and disappeared. He was considered a violent criminal, and he was not seen for nearly 11 months. During that time, in the town of Ericsdale, business owners started noticing that things were going missing. Percy was also a locksmith, and he'd been hiding out in this cabin in the woods, making keys and sneaking in to steal what he needed under the cover of darkness. My next guest is the president of the Ericsdale and District Community Chamber of Commerce, and was part of a group of residents who actually rebuilt the infamous Percy Moggy's cabin so generations of Manitobans could learn the story. And Keith Lundale's with us now live at Chicken Chef in Ashern. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So it's such an interesting story. What kinds of things was he stealing from the people in town?
Well, the one thing that we discovered at site was several his garbage, obviously, and so a lot of them were cans from the co-op. So because he was a locksmith, and most times he went into town at night undercover, he would take what he need and brought it back to his cabin home.
Now, this is just off the highway, right? The actual cabin site itself. Like, it's not. You have a little bit of a hike in if you want to go see it. Right?
It's actually not off the.
Pardon me, not the highway, outside of the.
Yeah, it's off what we call Moggy's Road. It was named after him, obviously, and it's 3/8 of a mile in. It's a quite nice jog. Hopefully, you're not allergic to poison ivy, because there's some of that available. I mean, that just comes with the territory.
You're going in the woods.
Yeah, you're going in the woods.
How was his hideout discovered in the first place? Who was it that sort of found him after 11 months?
Well, the thing is there's many somewhat myths or stories, but John Worms wrote a book about it, so there's a lot of history in that book. But and some were depicting that there were 2 women that came across Moggy, but that was never. It was 2 men, 2 Indigenous men, came across Moggy one day, and the conversation went where he was looking to dig Seneca root, and that was quite a.
That's what I'd read. That there were 2 men they were looking to dig, 2 men or women, as you said. It's a bit sort of muddy in terms of some of that. But he said, they came across him, and he said, "I'm hunting."
Yeah.
And they said it's not hunting season,
Yeah.
something's fishing, and
Yeah.
then they reported it.
I mean, a little
Yeah.
bit of that. I didn't hear that version. I heard more that he was looking at digging Seneca root, and it wasn't in the time to dig Seneca root.
Oh, that he was. Okay, got
and
it.
so, of course, my grandfather owned the general store in Mulvey Hill, and they went to the store and told my grandfather about this man. He didn't know where he was from or where he was, and my grandfather just leave the guy alone. He's not bothering anybody. But they couldn't do that. And they went down to Lundar, where the RCMP were stationed, and the local MLA, which was Guttormson, and he contacted the RCMP, and
it went from
shortly after that
Captured
he
him.
was. Yeah.
For today, if people make that little hike into the woods and survive the poison ivy, what are they going to see? Because you and a group of others, actually, the cabin itself was sort of dismantled by a local area farmer, I understand. But you guys had it rebuilt so people can visit. What will they see if they go today?
Yeah, well, when we so I'll just tell you a little of the backstory. There was conversation in a local coffee shop, having lunch with a few residents, and they started reminiscing about Mogies, and they came to us and Chamber of Commerce and thought that might be, well, one of them was our member of the Chamber of Commerce, Craig Houston, and thought it might be a good thing to look at for tourism. We were looking as a chamber to...
And you guys rebuilt it.
And so we rebuilt it. Ross Gumbel and his dad and his brother cut the logs down 1 year before, and then a group of us included Al Kellner, Craig Houston, myself, Jarmo Sidosella, who is a Finlander that is responsible for all the paintings and the murals in Eriksdale. And so then the first order of business is where we build it. And of course, I think it just fell down. It wasn't necessarily torn down.
Got it.
So we only had, I think, 2 layers of logs left. 3 on one side and 1 on the other. So there wasn't much left. And the discussion was around, where do we build it? Do we build it on site, or do we right beside it? So it came to a vote, and of course a couple of our members weren't happy.
And what'd you do?
We put it beside, because we thought the mystique of those logs was what Mogi touched those logs.
Yeah, that's the history.
So the thing is, at least you can compare the replica to, he actually lived here.
If people want to see photos, actually, while we're talking here, Keith and I, some of those photos of the cabin are up on our YouTube stream right now. So if you make the hike in to see it. By the way, Percy Mogi died in 1974. He did end up back in jail after committing thefts in Winnipeg as well. Now, I want to mention 2 other things this morning. There's so many historical things in this part of Manitoba, and Eriksdale is part of a lot of them. And we will be doing stories on some of them. But I want to nod to one of them, because I found a list of 33 super cool spots you can visit around the West Interlake. But I cannot I can't let you go before I ask about the Eriksdale Creamery. You worked there? It's like the actual original creamery. Tell me how old it is. It's a building people can visit, and you worked there.
Yeah, well, it was way before my time, because I came in 1970 from Edmonton with my parents, who bought a local grocery store. And so anyways, I can't really give you the actual date, but the thing is, it has been there for many, many years. It has many owners. The McFadden's owned it.
Yep.
Ben Gibbings bought it.
So this old original white building with the green trim.
Yep. And I remember the times with churning butter. We used to Ben used to bring in semi-loads of box butter, raw butter, and we reprocessed it for packaging for Safeway and the other grocery stores.
Was it called Eriksdale butter?
No, we couldn't, because that wasn't our original butter. It was just repackaged.
Okay.
And there's no way we had enough cream to be able to meet those type of demands for commercial, like Safeway.
Industry of a bygone era, right?
Yeah, and so local cream from the farmers. So there would be farmers, and there would be a cream truck. They would come and bring the cream to the creamery. Then they would test it. It had to be tested for its cream content, and then the checks were made out. The checks were put back into the washed cream cans. Then the cream truck, the driver, went over to the local grocery store and had orders from people that provided the cream. and then that their groceries were put in the cream can.
Bygone era.
And some of these people never came to town maybe once a year.
I love that Fraserwood had a creamery too.
Yes.
Around the Interlake, and there was a little bit of friendly competition. The time right now is 7:23. We've got much more show coming up. Before you go this morning, Keith, I want to ask you about a person you mentioned in our interview, because we're in this part of the Interlake. One of the men who was part of the project to rebuild Percy Mogi's cabin, who was involved with the chamber for years, is Craig Houston, and you mentioned. We want to take a moment. He was known to many in the Ericsdale area, and he just passed away. In fact, his funeral is tomorrow. Just briefly, how will you remember his contributions to this area?
Greatly, because Craig and I were very close. He was the general manager of the Ericsdale Credit Union, and I served as a board member, vice president, and president of the credit union. So we intertwined quite regularly, and a lot of our coffee shop talk was always about things that we could promote for Ericsdale. And we used to have our Chamber of Commerce meetings at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they had to be done by 8 because everybody had to go back to work.
Yeah.
And so it worked out really well. But Craig was an integral part of our fabric of our community. He hosted the annual 200 Club, and I mean, he spent weeks preparing jokes to pick on local people. And I'll tell you, you were in stitches the whole evening.
I hope there's some laughs and also beautiful memories of him as you have his funeral here in community tomorrow. Thank you so much for being with us here live, Keith.
Yep. Thank you, Marcy, for being here for West Interlake. It's nice to see that people can realize what's outside the perimeter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks again.
Keith Lundale, president of the Ericsdale and District Chamber of Commerce. Now, check out interlaketourism.com. I keep telling you about these 33 spots you can visit. If you're getting spring fever, you want to head out, or you're planning a Manitoba staycation for spring break or summer, check it out there. And we continue our show live here from, we're in Ashern this morning. It is right now 7:25 a.m. You're on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app or YouTube. And in Winnipeg, it has been minus 12. We're going for minus 5 with a sunny sky. And just updating our temperature now, we are still sitting at that minus 12 in Winnipeg. A lot cooler here. It is minus 19 this morning in Ashern. Well, let's talk morning sports. Paul McGowan's here. Hello.
Hello, Marcy.
So the Jets began the day in a three-way tie for first place in the Central.
Quite a logjam atop the Central Division, and the Jets do have a slight advantage, games in hand over Colorado and Dallas, but you want that top spot and home ice advantage, and it starts with winning games like the one they have tonight. New Jersey might not believe they're out of it. Scott Arniel might want the Jets to believe that the Devils are not out of it, but they are fairly out of it. 3-7 in their last 10. Certainly helps the Jets tonight that they will have a motivated Tyler Toffoli. Already has 6 points in his last 3. And tonight he's playing in game number 800.
It's always, fun to hit those personal milestones. And for myself, people have always kind of doubted me, saying I'm too slow and all that. And I think I've done a pretty good job. And, knock on wood, but 800 and don't plan on stopping.
Jets and Devils at 6 from New Jersey.
To another story this morning, Paul, let's go to curling next. Canada is still perfect at the Women's World Curling Championship in Nova Scotia.
And yesterday seemed on its face like a slightly easier day for Canada. They got 2-4 Japan, followed by 1-6 Turkey. It was actually 1-6 Turkey that made Canada sweat. Turkey led 5-4 heading into the final end. But then talk about an exclamation point. Rachel Homan scores 5 in the 10th for a 9-5 final. She talked afterward about the fact that despite a team's record, there are no easy games at the Worlds.
It's the best of the class here this week, and we know we have to bring our A game every time we step on the ice. You could lose any game out here because the field is so strong. I mean, those girls played phenomenal. I don't know what their stats are, but high 90s from lead to skip. So I think you can't get frustrated with that. It's just phenomenal to see and amazing for the game. That was a battle out there, and it took all of our rocks to win it in the last one.
Speaking of amazing for the game, Turkey, kind of an incredible story. They didn't have a curling facility until about 2010, then made their debut at the Worlds just 2 years ago. And so, yes, they are 1-7 right now, but very nearly scored a win against a Canadian rink that is the team to beat right now. And speaking of the team to beat, Canada up 3-0 after the first end right now against Estonia.
And finally, let's end on basketball. March Madness begins later today.
One of the reasons people love this tournament, of course, is the upsets. And I don't know if Dan Monson's story quite counts as an upset, but Dan Monson is coaching Long Beach State despite not really being the coach of Long Beach State. Monson was fired weeks ago before the team's regional playoffs. For logistical reasons, they said, okay, stay on until the end of the year. Long Beach then wins 3 straight games. They win the Big West tournament, and they find themselves now part of March Madness. Monson himself can't quite believe it, although he does have a helpful analogy.
You guys see the Seinfeld when George Costanza was trying to get fired and couldn't lose his job and still going to work every day, and that's me. I'm a Seinfeld episode going on right now in real life.
Dan Monson might be the most relatable man in America, a technically unemployed individual clumsily referencing a Seinfeld episode. Long Beach State begins their tournament today. So yeah, get those brackets in.
All right. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Marcy.
Paul McGowan with Morning Sports. Still ahead on our show, we're sitting with the Reeve and Auction Martin Asher and talking the rural economy and the role of hundreds of producers in the area. He used to be one.
You don't think of yourself really as an entrepreneur. Most people, I can't speak for everyone, but myself, I looked at myself as a steward of the land. A place. Some people say you don't raise cattle, you raise families, and it's a way of life. It's not you're not in it for the money. If you are, you're in the wrong business, because usually it's not here.
Still ahead, Art Yonason talks about healthcare hopes, amalgamation, and diversifying the Interlake. Communities in Focus continues live from Ashburn after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's -12 in Winnipeg. We will warm up. We'll be a little warmer than yesterday. A high today of -5. We start out with sunshine, and then we see a few afternoon clouds roll in. An apology, 68 years in the making. Premier Rob Canoe will apologize on behalf of the province to Edward Ambrose and Richard Beauvais later today. The lawyer for the 2 men who were switched at birth says he wants the Manitoba government to offer them fair compensation. The 2 were born at the same hospital in Arborg and taken home by the other's biological parents. Lawyer Bill Gange says it took years for the province to even acknowledge the mistake.
Nothing is going to bring back the last 68 years. I understand that. But in our judicial process, the only thing that we have is money. I'm hopeful that the government is going to respond thoughtfully.
Ambrose and Beauvais met in person for the first time earlier this week. Yesterday, Northern Affairs Minister Ian Bushy didn't comment on compensation, saying he didn't want to preempt the meeting. Domo Gas in Winnipeg says it's working hard to make sure it can keep filling customers' tanks when they jump to the pump. Imperial Oil shut down its pipeline from Gretna to Winnipeg on Friday after a strain on a portion of the line was identified near St. Adolphe. The company says replacing that section will take about 3 months. Graham Carlisle, Vice President of Corporate Services for Domo in Western Canada, says supply started to dwindle at the Domo station on Donald on Tuesday night.
Yeah, we've come close, but we've managed to be okay so far. So touch wood on that.
Carlisle says they are working hard to bring product in by truck, although they do have to travel further to get it. Domo has contracted haulers who drive to Gretna and also to Regina and Saskatoon. He says it stands to reason that additional cost may be reflected in the price of the pumps, although he concedes Domo is more of a price follower than a price setter. City councillors will decide the fate of Winnipeg's most famous intersection today. Mayor Scott Gillingham came out in support of reopening the busy intersection to pedestrians earlier this month. He says the cost of repairing the concourse under Portage and Main doesn't make financial sense. Today, councillors will vote on a report recommending decommissioning the concourse and beginning the design and construction of the reopened intersection to pedestrians. If passed today, Gillingham hopes to have the barricades down and people walking across Portage and Main by 2025. A British Columbia man who lost more than $700,000 in an investment fraud is thankful he was able to get his money back. And he credits the recovery to the actions taken in a Winnipeg fraud case that happened around the same time. Alan Landa in Vancouver says he was devastated when he learned a fraudster had taken the money he sent by wire transfer to what he thought would be a safe investment for his business. After the incident, Landa reflected on his interactions with the imposter behind the fraud.
Every phone call, every word spoken went through my head over and over again, and I kept going, well, that was a red flag. How did I miss that one? Oh my God, how did I fall for this?
The bank put a freeze on the account where Landa's money was received by a company linked to the alleged fraud. He filed a lawsuit and got a court order to recover the $735,000 he had invested. A local organization supporting children in care is getting to work on implementing Bill C-92. That bill gives jurisdiction to Indigenous communities and families. Mia Gunther, CEO at the Knowles Centre, says the bill offers important access for children.
When you think of Bill C-92 and supporting families in having a voice and having making sure that the children in care have some agency around who they get to see, who their support system is, and connecting them with families.
More than 80% of children at Knowles Centre identify as Indigenous. The organization runs a foster care program, group home, and independent living for kids who age out of care. Winnipeg City Council's approved its 2024 budget. The operating budget passed yesterday with 14 voting in favour, 1 against. The capital budget also passed 13-2. The budget includes a 3.5% property tax increase. Some services funded in this year's budget include an overall increase to library hours, although the Millennium Library will now close on Sundays. 2 of 3 swimming pools, which had been slated to close, will now stay open longer. But Happyland Outdoor Pool will likely not reopen. And facing questions on snow clearing, taxes, potholes, and bike lanes, Brandon city planners have laid out the future for that city over the next 30 years. The open house was part of a final chance for community feedback on the Brandon city plan. Planners say growth is a key part of their plan. Brandon is expected to see around 10,000 new residents over the next 3 decades. Maureen Monroe has lived in Brandon for many years. Her biggest concern is housing and development.
I don't agree that we would have all of Brandon mixed development, to be honest. I think there still has to be different levels of residential, and I don't agree that there should be commercial involved in the neighborhoods and so forth.
The city has been consulting on community plan for 2 years. It is expected to go before Brandon City Council in about a month. You can find more news updated throughout your day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather Walls.
You're welcome.
We are broadcasting with Communities in Focus live in Ashburn, Manitoba, the Chicken Chef this morning. Some of you are on my Facebook page, or if you're on YouTube, you're seeing some photos from the area. I can't actually get them uploaded fast enough. Someone's just writing to me with family history from this area, so I'll make sure that we get some of those on today, between today and tomorrow. We have many more stories, though, coming up, so please stay with us as we are looking at the West Interlake and the overall region here. Right now, though, let's go back to Winnipeg for a moment. Abby Adiemi has our full forecasts for the region, and also an update on traffic. Hello again.
Hello, Marcy. Once again, Winnipeg, we are at -12 with partly cloudy skies lingering overhead. Expect sunny morning turning into a mix of sun and clouds in the afternoon with a high of -5. With the wind chill, it could feel like -24. I've been talking about that all morning. Heading west to Brandon, we have partly cloudy conditions at -16. Expect a mix of sun and clouds becoming cloudier around noon, and Brandon will see a high of 7. Thompson and Churchill both at -29, and the highs for today will hover between -17 and -20 for that part of the northern region. And then in Dauphin, it's currently -18 and clear. Anticipate a mix of sun and clouds with a high of -7. Gimli is currently at -18, partly cloudy over there. The Interlake region starts sunny, but then we'll see a transition of a mix of sun and clouds later, and we'll see a high of -7 rather. Now for the Western Interlake, that's Ashton, Aberg, and Hecla, you'll be seeing a high of -6 today. Steinbach is at -15, and finally Morris is at -13. Nothing to report in traffic, but if you see anything, give us a call, 788-3093.
You ready for some stories about travel? Not so much traffic, but travel and transportation, Abby?
I really want to hear about the Narrows because I think I did a drive around the Narrows 3 years ago, but I want to get updates.
Oh, it's gorgeous. So that picture, as we mentioned last hour, looking at the black and white photo of the ferry that crosses Lake Manitoba at the Narrows, is up on my Facebook page. Some of the comments that are coming in are about family history and travel. Sonia Lundstrom wrote in, my family immigrated to Eriksdale in 1913, and she wrote to us, 4 small children living in a tent, creating a life of hope and possibility in the new land. So delighted you're visiting, she writes. Notice the Swedish flag when you're in Eriksdale, with a rich Swedish history is there. And Sonia shares, my mom is kicking up her heels. She's so excited that you're doing this. This is our beginnings. And this next little story that came in is a lovely one too, Abby, and this one is actually more about commuting. Mm-hmm. So we had Susan Quinn write in. Now, what I can tell you about this part of Manitoba is Highway 6 is busy. So this is a connecting highway, and you're going all the way up north, and you have so many people coming through. Yesterday, we saw a number of buses coming through. One of them said Pinemutang, that's a First Nation just north of here, Fairford, and they had people getting off. And then we also had another table full of students that were here. They were on their way to a science fair in Winnipeg. They were coming from OCN. So this is just a busy travel route for people from all kinds of communities. Susan wrote in and said she's with Pembina Trail School Division. She said, Ashern, our memory from there makes me smile. So she says, we taught in Snow Lake years ago, and on a trip down to the city, our muffler on our Volvo went, probably from the gravel road. So we pulled into the service station in Ashern, no muffler in stock. And the mechanic improvised by cutting this large tomato juice can, those big ones?
Yep.
And wrapped it over the hole with metal strapping.
Holy.
And then we forgot about it. And 18 months later, when we went to a muffler place in Winnipeg, the city mechanics couldn't believe what they saw. So she wrote in, truly a lesson that necessity is the mother of invention. They were wonderful. They found a way. We got home. Ashern was always a break on the long road to Snow Lake on our way to Winnipeg, and everyone was so friendly. So isn't that great?
Now, are you telling me to get myself a can of tomato also on my way? Because I'm actually taking a trip to Fisher River later, and definitely maybe a can of tomatoes is going to be something for me.
Maybe one of the big tomato juice cans. Maybe they'll help you. Who knew that could help in a pinch?
Now I know.
Love these stories coming in. If you have anything to share about the West Interlake, a fond memory, some history, a comment about the future here, the Reef's still coming up in this half hour of the show, so stay with us. Next, though, a proud nurse from the Lakeshore General Hospital here in Ashern shows me a video. I watched this with him yesterday. In the video, he's standing over a patient, encouraging him to breathe in and breathe out. And they're connecting through language. Have a listen.
Good morning, this here. Anin. Oh, good, very good.
What's the word you're using there?
Sodo. Minawa means again. I want them to breathe deeply again while I was listening in my stethoscope.
This patient happens to be Indigenous in the video you're showing me. You are Filipino. What's their reaction when you begin to be able to speak in Soto?
They're so happy. The connection is much, much better. Person to person, you can connect better. Yeah. And you gain trust. Yeah, that's very important.
That is Ramsey Tabing. He is the jolliest 66-year-old guy you'll ever meet, I promise you. He's just lovely. He works in the dialysis unit at the hospital here in Ashern, and as you heard, he has a number of patients from all over the place, including Indigenous patients who are traveling here from surrounding communities that are nearby. Many of his patients are coming for treatments, as I mentioned, in dialysis, and they come from all over. So he decided when it comes to serving all his patients that he would pick up some languages like Soto. But as you'll hear, Ramsey has enjoyed connecting with the many aspects of being a resident of the West Interlake. I did sit down with him at his home in Ashern to talk about his life here and how he feels about more Filipino nurses who've just settled in the area in recent weeks. Ramsey, thank you for having me at your home in Ashern.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm excited. Very excited.
Now, I don't know if I've talked to anyone that loves living here as much as you. How long have you lived in Ashern?
Well, I have been in Ashern for the past 14 years. This is my 14th year. I started working in the hospital in October of 2010.
Yeah. And so when you came to Canada and you went through all of, the procedures to be able to work here as a nurse, how many places did you apply to back when you first were trying to find work here?
Maybe 100, but Ashern was the first one to respond. So,
did you know anything about this part of Manitoba?
no, never. I was just confined in Winnipeg, up to Lockport or Selkirk, just fishing.
Yeah. You like to fish?
I do, and I love pickerels and whitefish.
So you came here to work in Ashern, and what did you think when you first settled here?
At first, I was not so sure about what's gonna happen. But then after some time, because the environment was so friendly, I was able to settle down.
Were there a lot of Filipino nurses here in Ashern at the time?
There were only 2 that I know of.
So it's interesting because we're talking to you about your love of the area and working in Ashern all these years. As you know, there's new Filipino nurses that are coming through the province. I think they've actually just been settled in the last couple of weeks here. What would you say to them about arriving here and being new?
First of all, I am so happy. Now we have a little community. And what I can say is that they just have to believe in themselves, be confident. I hope there will be more coming, and I hope they can practice their profession, nursing profession, sooner than soon. I hope everyone will be successful.
We are not sitting, in case people are wondering, we're not sitting inside the dialysis unit in the hospital, in part because it's under renovation.
Under repairs right now. So we were deployed. Some of the patients were deployed in Hudson. Some are in Gimli, and some are in Selkirk. And also the staff were deployed. So I am at present deployed in Gimli. It's around 150 kilometers from Ashern.
Hospital-wise out here, you work at the Lakeshore General Hospital.
It can house 14 admitted patients right now, and the ER, it can accommodate 6.
Okay. How many people in the dialysis unit do you work with?
Actually, there are 10 beds, open beds in the dialysis area. And as of now, we have 21. And the hospital is expanding. They're going to make it a 24-bed capacity. So it will be a big one.
Where did you build community here over the years?
In the hospital, I was able to build my relationships, not only with the people inside the hospital as patients, but also with my co-workers and with the community at large.
Tell me a bit about your relationships with your patients, because you work in a unit where you will spend actually hours and hours with the same people because it's dialysis, right?
Yeah, well, I joke with them. I make it a point that somehow they are going to forget that they are attached to the machine. So I like to make them laugh.
How many years did you have to wait from when you came? I appreciate it was 14 years ago, but from when you came to Canada and you came to Manitoba specifically, how long did you have to wait before you were able to work as a nurse?
It took me some years. I worked as a laborer just to get a work permit so that I can be able to legally work, and then I worked on my nursing. I came from the Philippines as an RN. I was ready to do anything because I learned to love the place.
What did it feel like for you when you were able again to work as a nurse?
I felt so happy and blessed. It is my first love to be a nurse. Secondly, I am also an accountant, but I practiced accounting for 10 years in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, and 2 years in Bahrain. Yeah.
Ashern, you talked about the people, the community, and why you love it out here. What do you like to do in the area?
Fishing. I admire nature.
Where are your fishing spots?
Well, there are 2 nice places here in the area, near to Ashern. There's the Fairford Bridge a little bit north.
That's a Pinemutang. That's actually where the top of the Lake Manitoba, where there's a dam there, yeah.
Yes, and then there is the Narrows. I really like the people, so I have to connect with them a little bit more intimate. So I tried my best to learn the language, and at first it's quite difficult. But then, little by little, I was able to learn the few basic greetings like Anin, Kimenoya, are you okay? I can also count 1 to 5.
Oh, show us. Prove it.
Pisik, Nis, Nitwe, Niwen, Nanan. That's 1 to 5.
In Soto. Thank you so much, Ramsey, for telling us your story and sharing your love of Ashern with us. Appreciate having you with us today.
Thank you also. You're very welcome.
Ramsey Tabing, Manny loves this area. He is a nurse in the dialysis unit here in Ashern, Manitoba at the Lakeshore General Hospital. Time right now is 11 minutes to 8 o'clock. I just want to slide in a couple minutes of local music. If you were with us earlier this morning, then you heard how Derek McCandles, who's playing this track, has been working up at setting up something special. The Roger Kimley Music Festival in Ericsdale. In 2020, they set it up as a way to honor their 3 friends who passed away. Maybe you'll be checking it out this summer.
If I go back on something I said, both thought it best that we'd just be friends, though I agreed, and at the time my intentions were good. Well, do you mind if I go back on my word? Well, do you mind if I go back on my word? Thought of never loving you seems so absurd. Though I agreed, at the time my intentions were good. Well, do you mind if I go back on my word?
This part of Manitoba, the beautiful West Interlake. This is Derek McCandles with an original tune. Their festival is coming up this summer, the Roger Kimley Music Festival, August 16th to 18th. And for more information, you can go online and check it out. Well, Ericsdale, of course, is the site of that festival. That's about 20 minutes away from where we are this morning. We're in Ashern, Manitoba at the Chicken Chef, looking at the sun coming up here in the Interlake. And next on the show, I first met my next guest, Art Jonassen, when he was in an emergency situation during the 2011 flood. A cattle rancher in nearby Vogar, Manitoba at the time. He was loading up his cows to try and save them from the rising water. Today, Jonassen is the reeve of the arm of the West Interlake and represents hundreds of ranchers in this area, as well as people in the communities of Ashern and Ericsdale, cottagers and seasonal visitors. And he's with us now. Good morning.
Morning, Marcy. It's been a long time. A lot of water under the bridge.
Well said. Well said. Thanks for having us back in your beautiful part of the province. What's it like representing such a big, diverse population of people that I just mentioned?
It's a challenge. We were sort of forced to amalgamate in 2014, which nobody really wanted to see it happen. It was, the arm of Ericsdale was doing fine on its own. The arm of Siglaness was struggling with the flood, but we're managing. But at the time, the province wanted to any municipality under 1,000 people had to amalgamate with a neighbor. So we were put into that position. So
this is coming up on 10 years of amalgamation, right? So what's been the greatest benefit, and what do you think is, you were talking to me off air about the younger generation being a big part of the success you think moving forward?
Yes, I think the big thing is the younger people know each other more. In the old, before the amalgamation, there was a lot of competition between towns along Number 6 Highway, and there was a great deal of competition between Ericsdale and Ashern. There was always a competition, and I think now we're seeing past that, I hope, and are looking at, I know Ericsdale has their Roger Kimley Festival. They have a curling rink. Ashern doesn't have a curling rink, but we can share that, right?
Yep.
We have 2 hospitals within our municipality. I think we're the only municipality in Manitoba that has 2 hospitals, and they work really well together. Ashern is the further north hospital, so they get are very busy from everyone north of Ashern. Ashern is the first hospital coming down number 6, but Eriksdale runs a terrific hospital as well.
So just so people can place it, Ashern and Eriksdale, we talk a lot about because they're the two main communities that are like town sites. So there's about 400 people in Eriksdale, about 700 here in Ashern. I think I got close numbers there.
Yeah,
close.
Pretty close. Yeah.
Do people worry about the healthcare situation? Because moving forward, we just heard about a nurse about changes coming to Lakeshore up the way from here in Ashern. What does the future of healthcare services in this West Interlake look like in the next while? Because the NDP also made the promise for the ER in Eriksdale. So, 20 minutes apart. Is all of that going to be coming to fruition? What's your sense of all this?
Well, a lot of these decisions were made by the province almost 8 years ago. Shared health.
The previous government, yeah.
Yeah, it was the NDP government.
Oh, sorry, previous government.
Yeah, previous government looked at changing up the healthcare system, and Shared Health was formed, and Shared Health had decided that they went all across the province and looked for ideas from municipalities, and we were all consulted, and what came back from that was people wanted services closer to home. They didn't want to have to all go to Winnipeg for all their services, and they wanted emergencies right now. If you were to have an emergency, you would have to be hauled right into Winnipeg because there were no emergency rooms. They just fixed you up, patched you up, and sent you into Winnipeg.
So if Eriksdale's getting new beds, we know that's happening. It's happening now.
Ashern.
Pardon me, Ashern. I'm pointing at the wrong. Yeah. I'm pointing out the window like people can see me. Ashern Hospital getting new beds. Eriksdale, a new ER. Do you have any timeline on that, or is that confirmed, or what other plans might be in the works for healthcare in Eriksdale?
Well, right now they're talking about an ambulance garage, a three bay ambulance garage going into Eriksdale, which is good for the community, and using it as a teaching garage as well. Like they're going to try to train people there. Ashern just got an expansion of 28 beds. Mm-hmm. And this was decided as a hub and spoke model for healthcare. There was going to be regional hubs and community hospitals, and so Ashern was chosen as a regional hub because of its furthest north and services the area north, and so they expanded the hospital. Actually, they replaced the old hospital with a new 28-bed, fully modern hospital that should be up and running next fall.
Next fall, I was going to ask you about timelines.
Yeah, next fall.
I know.
But the old hospital then is also going to be expanded into an emergency room as well. So they're expanding from 5 beds in the emergency room to 13 beds.
I know that Communities in Focus is obviously, we're here for our show, but it's a week-long endeavor, and we're covering so many different stories that'll be rolling out in the next while. Mm-hmm. And my colleague Bryce Hoy, I know, is going to have some healthcare stories coming up as well, looking at more detail. So I don't mean to rush you along. Okay. But I do want to ask you as the last question this morning, Art, what do you think is the future for the West Interlake? Like, what's the big thing you're most excited about for this area?
I look at this area is experiencing right now a new wave of immigration. We're all immigrants, and this, my ancestors came here 100 years ago, but there's new immigrants coming into our region, and I was reading. They had a reading week, and so I had an opportunity to read to the little
kids at the school.
Yeah, 4 and under. And we have a multinational classroom there. I think there was kids from the Philippines, kids from Korea, kids from Ukraine, kids from China, and there were all the local kids. It was a multinational classroom.
And that's change in terms of the diversity that's represented in this area.
That is the change. There's a lot of business owners coming, immigrant business owners coming into the area. Our challenge going forward is to incorporate those people into our communities. We have to open our doors to them and make them become part of our fabric.
Thank you so much for being with us. Wonderful to see you, and all the best.
Yes, thank you very much, Marcy. It was great talking to you again.
That is Art Jonassen, the Reeve of the Arm of the West Interlake. And as mentioned, Communities in Focus, we have our broadcast from here, but we'll continue sharing stories from this part of Manitoba in the weeks ahead. And you can check some of them out online right now. Right now, let's get into news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. The lawyer for two men who were switched at birth at a Manitoba hospital in the 1950s says the pair is trying to stay positive. Edward Ambrose and Richard Beauvais were born at a hospital in Arborg, but then were sent home with the other's biological parents. Premier Rob Canoe will meet both men at the Manitoba legislature today and deliver a formal apology. Domo Gas in Winnipeg says it's working hard to make sure it can keep filling customers' tanks following the closure of the Imperial Oil pipeline from Gretna to Winnipeg. Graham Carlisle at Domo's Winnipeg headquarters says supplies started dwindling at its station on Donald Street on Tuesday night. He says they have contracted haulers who drive to Gretna, Regina, and Saskatoon to bring supply back to Winnipeg. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
High of -5 today. It's -12 right now in Winnipeg, -19. Chilly out here in Ashern. And coming up, I've been mentioning CBC reporter Bryce Hoy. He's going to find out how students in Ashern are getting a crash course in land-based skills. Stay tuned.
Today on Q with Tom Power. It's not every day that you get to sit down with a pioneer of comedy, of film, and of TV, but I got to sit down with Carol Burnett to talk about the early days and all the ground she broke. All I can tell you is, what a storyteller.
I never thought of being a performer. I thought I would be a journalist.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Researchers around the world are working together to identify undiscovered species in the oceans. It's an urgent job. Some of the 2 million species underwater may disappear before they're ever identified. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The controversial Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline is nearing the finish line. In fact, the federal government-owned pipeline is beginning to hold oil. As business reporter Kyle Bax tells us, it is a milestone in a lengthy and costly process.
I reflect on some lyrics from a Grateful Dead song. What a long, strange trip it's been. 12 years from beginning to in-service.
On stage at the CERAWeek Energy Conference in Texas, Mark Mackey recounts the journey to develop and build the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline. Mackey is an executive with the Crown Corporation, owned by the federal government. He says the pipeline is beginning to fill with oil and is expected to make its first shipment before Canada Day.
We've got a couple things we need to get done, and once that's in place, we'll begin service.
The pipeline will transport oil from Alberta to the west coast, tripling the amount of an existing pipeline and giving an expected boost to Canadian oil prices. Mackey says the price tag could still rise or fall as final work is completed. The current $34 billion cost has been hit with the impacts of the pandemic, floods, and wildfires.
Yes, it is expensive. To do the project right, that's what it costs to build infrastructure.
It'll make a big difference on the differential.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says it was the right decision by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau 6 years ago to purchase the project.
I'm pleased that they stepped in to de-risk and finish the project.
Still, Smith says ideally the federal government would have supported other pipelines to ensure they too were built. As for Trans Mountain, once completed, the federal government has committed to selling it, including a stake to Indigenous communities. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Houston.
About 300 protesting fishermen are back in front of the Newfoundland and Labrador legislature.
We're not going to give anybody a reason to call us an angry mob.
Organizers are urging them to remain peaceful. Scuffles broke out yesterday between protesters and staff trying to enter the building. The situation became so tense, Andrew Furey's government had to postpone its budget. It says it will table its budget today. The fishermen are allowed to keep protesting, but a court injunction says they cannot block access to the legislature. Canada's health minister says he's looking to restrict the marketing and sale of nicotine pouches to kids. The pouches are placed between your cheek and your gums. They're meant to help adults quit smoking. But there are growing concerns. The pouches are creating new nicotine addiction in youth. Marina von Stackelberg reports.
Stay the hell away from our kids.
Canada's Health Minister Mark Holland with a scathing message to the makers of flavored nicotine pouches, 9 months after his department authorized their sale.
The tobacco industry yet again used a loophole.
Nicotine pouches sold in Canada under the name Zonic don't fall under any current tobacco or vaping laws, so nothing restricts where they can be sold or how old you must be to buy them. Plus, they come in colorful packages with fruity flavors.
We shouldn't be seeing flavors that are targeting kids. Flavors like, winter berry splash or whatever, tropical fruit.
Holland says he's seeking extra authority to restrict flavors, advertising, and what stores can sell Zonic. It's not clear how he'll do that, but it could be through legislation. Zonic spokesperson Eric Gagnon says his company has already taken steps to prevent kids from buying the pouches.
Every place you're going to see Zonic is behind the counter and age verified. That is self-regulated.
Rob Cunningham is with the Canadian Cancer Society.
We need to protect youth with solid legislative measures, not just claims from the tobacco industry.
Health Canada has now issued a public advisory warning about the misuse of nicotine pouches. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Antony Blinken is in Egypt this morning. The U.S. Secretary of State has already met with Egypt's president in Cairo. The U.S. State Department says the two discussed negotiations to secure a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The plan calls for a pause of at least 6 weeks in the war and the release of all hostages. This is Blinken's sixth tour to the region since October 7th. He will travel to Israel tomorrow. Blinken says the gaps are narrowing. The United States, Egypt, and Qatar have spent several weeks trying to get to a deal. Methane coming out of landfills is a big problem for climate change, and the Canadian government is trying to regulate that. But right now, we don't know exactly how much methane is being released by Canada's landfills. Enter a research team from St. Francis Xavier University in Nova Scotia. Shayna Luck joined them in their mobile lab.
This is what a plume looks like. See, like everything went flat.
Nadia Taraki is driving in a disused landfill outside Halifax and following blips on her laptop hooked up to sensitive gas monitoring equipment. She's looking for signs of an otherwise invisible, odorless gas, methane. Canada plans to regulate landfill methane. It's the country's third biggest emitter after oil and gas extraction and agricultural sources. But we only have estimates. That's why Taraki's team Flux Lab from St. Francis Xavier University is taking exact measurements. Funded by 2 federal agencies and the United Nations, they visited 145 landfills from Vancouver Island to St. John's. Dave Risk is their team leader.
Landfill operators will be spending money on mitigation and installing capture systems. Then we need to know that their investments are for the right reasons and will make a difference.
Landfills lock in methane emissions for decades.
This landfill is still emitting, and it's been closed for 25 years, and it will keep emitting for probably another 75 years.
Some modern landfills capture methane and burn it off. Some even put trash back to use by generating electricity from the burning methane. Climate policy expert Jennifer Winter says regulations need to be standardized across the country.
It's fairly simple. Let's put in a gas capture system, let's monitor, and let's prioritize capture for use.
The federal government's regulations on landfill methane are due to be published later this year. Shayna Luck, CBC News, Halifax.
And speaking of landfills, the United Nations is warning the world is on pace to produce 82 million tons of electronic waste by 2030. That is 82 million tons of old cell phones, laptops, TVs, and e-cigarettes. Kees Balde is a co-author of the UN's new report.
To date, only 22.3% of e-waste has been collected and recycled in a good way for the environment. So the vast majority of e-waste is not managed in a correct manner.
E-waste often contains toxic or hazardous substances, including mercury. Experts say part of the problem is our increased consumption. The report also calls on companies to start making electronics with longer life cycles. Quebecers will get their chance to pay their respects to Brian Mulroney today in his home province. Mulroney's casket will lie in repose at St. Patrick's Basilica in Montreal today and tomorrow. Dignitaries will get the chance to visit first, then the public will get their turn beginning at noon Eastern. Mulroney was born in Baie-Comeau, a city northeast of Quebec City. His funeral will take place this Saturday at Montreal's Notre Dame Basilica. You can listen to coverage of the funeral here on CBC Radio 1 beginning at 9:30 Central, 8:30 Mountain, 7:30 Pacific. The Manitoba legislature is preparing to issue an apology today. The recipients are two men switched at birth nearly 70 years ago. Karen Pauls has the story from Winnipeg.
The age we are now, there's a lot of years that have been lost and that you'll never get back, eh?
Eddie Ambrose, now of Winnipeg, and Richard Beauvais of Seashelt, BC, were born on the same day at a small Manitoba hospital in 1955. 2 years ago, they discovered through a DNA test that they'd been raised by each other's biological families. Beauvais grew up in a Métis community and is a residential day school survivor who was taken from his family during the 60s scoop. Ambrose was raised Ukrainian. He recently got his Métis citizenship.
To actually see him in person, it's a whole different feeling of someone because he is there in the flesh in front of you. The features of my father, which is his father, you can see it in him, and the features in Mom. It's there, you can see.
Bill Gange is their lawyer. He says today's apology in the Manitoba legislature is important.
An acknowledgement that a mistake was made.
But he's fighting for more.
My hope is that we're going to be able to work out a compensation package.
As for Ambrose and Beauvais, they're spending the week getting to know each other.
You know, we just need to learn and listen from each other. You tell our stories as how we grew up.
And find a way to reclaim their lives. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Manitoba. Could you make out those cutie patooties? That was a whole group of students we met yesterday here at the Chicken Chef in Ashburn, and they were saying, good morning. We are live here this morning, and you are listening to CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're on 89.3. Might also be listening on 990 AM on the app or YouTube. Now, those students are actually in grades 4 to 6. They're from OCN, and they were on their way, stopping here for lunch. They're on their way to a science fair in Winnipeg. And this is a really busy thoroughfare for folks just off Highway 6. A lot of people come off the highway and come into Main Street, Ashburn. Outside the window here in Ashburn this morning, we see the sun coming up, and it is cold. It's been minus 19 here. Well, this half hour in the show, speaking of students, from heading out ice fishing to exploring forests and learning the art of trapping, we're going to hear about a land-based school program here in Ashburn that's teaching high schoolers in the Interlake about the value of staying in touch with nature. So that story is coming up. Stay tuned. CBC reporter Bryce Hoy is going to tell us all about it. Right now, though, let's turn our attention to what's happening in the situation with headlines, and that is Heather Wells joining us from Winnipeg.
Good morning. Well, Premier Wab Kinew will apologize today on behalf of the province to Edward Ambrose and Richard Beauvais. The lawyer for the two men who were switched at birth says he wants the Manitoba government to give them fair compensation. The two men were born at the same hospital in Arborg and taken home by the other's biological parents. Ambrose and Beauvais met in person for the very first time earlier this week. And city councillors will decide the fate of Winnipeg's most iconic intersection today. Mayor Scott Gillingham came out supporting reopening Portage and Main to pedestrians earlier this month. He says the cost of repairing the concourse under Portage and Main just doesn't make financial sense. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather. And now we're moving to what's happening in the weather forecast. I've been talking about it's chilly. The payoff is it's sunny. I can't decide what I want more, warmth or, then you get cloudy skies or sunshine and cold, Abby.
I know it's kind of chilly over there. I'm just checking the forecast here. It's chilly over there, but the good thing is the high for today in the West Interlake will be -6, though it's going to be chilly and sunny as you said. Let's come back to Winnipeg for now. We are at -2 minus 12. It's chilly outside. It's partly cloudy. I'm waiting for the sun to poke out, but we should be seeing a mix of sun and cloud in the city today. Brandon is at minus 16. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds today. Thompson and Churchill both clear and at minus 29. Dauphin and Gimli at minus 18, and Winnipeg will be rising to will be seeing a high of minus 5 degrees today. Now, two traffic issues to call commuters' attention to this morning. Grant and east of Kinnaston, there's a motor vehicle collision reported there, which has knocked down a traffic standard and the lights are flashing. So you need to treat the intersection as an all-way stop. We hear the signal crews are on their way, and as I speak now, they should be there trying to fix that light standard. And also, Kit called and reported a two-vehicle collision northbound Pemina just after Dunker Avenue between the Cottage Bakery and Vincent Massey Collegiate. So you need to also take care as you approach that area. That's northbound Pemina. If you see anything in traffic, let us know. 788-3093.
All right, thank you, Abby. Well, as people start to come in to Chicken Chef here and sit down and listen to the show, there's also some folks that have been here all along. Kiara Stark is one of them. She works here. Her dad actually is here and runs the place. She's 19. We were just talking about Ashburn Central. We have that school story coming up. You graduated when? When did you graduate?
2023.
Oh, congratulations. So you work here at Chicken Chef?
Yes, I do.
Yes, but you do a lot of things because like most people in rural Manitoba, you kind of have to stay busy on the land. Tell me a little bit about your family. Do you guys have farming operation around here? Do you farm? Where do you farm?
I farm just right outside of town.
Yeah, and what do you do on the farm?
I help out everything. I do fencing, I help out raking, I help out cutting. I usually sit in the cabin with my grandpa in the tractor. I help him bale. I help calving.
Oh my gosh.
I just help out everywhere as much as I can.
I'm a city kid, so we were talking about this off air, and you were talking about helping with calving. What kinds of things do you do with the calving? Because it's season right now, right? What do you do?
Well, we have them in a pen, all the pregnant moms, all the cows. We have them in a pen, so once they give birth, we just watch them for a bit, make sure they don't have them in the water, so they don't drown or anything. And so we just make sure that they're breathing, that they're alive, that they're okay, that the mother's there for them. And then once they're at least about a couple hours old or maybe a day old, then we go out and we round them up, and then we catch them. The moms don't really do much, but we just have to make sure that they don't charge us.
Got it.
And then so I'll have I usually am the one that holds the baby so it doesn't run away or accidentally mess up a tag or something.
Amazing.
So I usually hold the calf. One of my brothers will watch the cow so she doesn't charge us, and then my other brother will do the tagging.
I love that. I love that you know how to do all of that. Now, you also do haying on the farm. What does that mean?
I do a 9-wheel rake. My little sister, she's 13. She does the 6-wheel rake. And so we just rake the hay. I don't really know much to say about that one.
You know what? There's not much to say to people who are listening from the West Interlake, but I'm a city kid, so all of this to me is there's so many skills that you build because you have to keep the way of life going right in the farm. Do you like it, farming? What do you think of it?
I like farming. It's like I said, in the moment, it's not very fun, but afterwards, it's like an addiction. You just want to go back and keep doing it.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you so much for telling us about your slice of life here in West Interlake and for having us set up shop in Chicken Chef. It's nice to have spent some time with you over the last little while, and thanks for coming on the air.
Thank you for having me.
That's Kiara Stark, and she is she's 19, lives out here, just graduated last year. We'll see what she's going to do and achieve next. I'm sure it's anything she puts her mind to. Just giving us a slice of the farming life here in the West Interlake. Stay tuned. We've got a story coming up about a program here at the local high school. So high schoolers in the Interlake got their hands dirty this week as well. And I'm talking literally. This was all in the name of getting more in touch with the land. Next up on Communities in Focus live from Ashburn, the CBC's Bryce Hoy got a chance to hang out with some students from Ashburn Central High School this week. And they were trying their hand at skinning coyotes. Now, You heard that right. Bryce is here, live at Chicken Chef, to tell us more. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So why were the students learning how to skin coyotes?
Right, so it's part of this land-based program in the division. It started about a year ago in Lakeshore School Division. That's the division in the Interlake. So it incorporates a bunch of things, elements of Indigenous culture and ways of knowing. Also, students learn a wide range of skills from ice fishing, trapping. They go outside and explore. They learn fur preparation, stuff like this. So when we got to the school's wood shop on Monday, which is where this was taking place, there were 4 coyotes strung up in the shop. There was something in the air, a smell that I noticed as soon as I came in, and pretty soon, program coordinator Andrea Neiser was showing them all where to make the first cuts.
There's a variety of reactions. Some students aren't so fond of it. Some students are right into it. A lot of students have been exposed with these northern communities, so they're really interested in learning themselves how to do it. They're amazed that you get such a beautiful fur from such a gruesome activity, but the outcome is worth it.
So yeah, Andrea says that you can make all sorts of things from coyote fur, like mitts, it goes into coat trim, moccasins, there's a bunch of stuff, right? So I should also point out that these animals, they were donated by a local trapper, and for those students who weren't too fond of skinning an animal, they got alternative programming.
Now, what is the division hoping to achieve through the land-based program itself?
So I spoke with the division assistant superintendent, Donald Nickel, all about that, and he said there's been more of an embrace at the provincial level in recent years in Indigenous ways of knowing. That's something Nickel says is particularly important here in the Lakeshore region because he says nearly half of the student body is Indigenous.
We also have this really rich history where we have folks who've immigrated to the area about 100 years ago, and they've worked on the land here as farmers. And then we also have our First Nations communities and Métis who've been here for much, much longer. And so the land is a place where we can come together. Students can learn together, they can appreciate each other, and it's about connecting with our past, our history, and if you know where you've come from, you can know where you're going. And so I think that's really powerful for our students here.
So actually, Nickel was there, and I saw him kind of walking around and teaching the kids, you want to slice here, slice like that. So it seems like he has a little experience himself. But he says it's because of all of that shared history and that high proportion of Indigenous students that they've introduced these land-based programs.
So I know you talked to some students, too, about how they felt about learning how to skin and prepare the fur from the coyotes, right?
I did. So 1 or 2 were a little bit reluctant at the beginning, but they got more comfortable. Owen Favel was really into it. Favel's 17 years old. He actually went to a different school, Fisher Branch Collegiate, but he's part of this program that's really cool. It's called the Lakeshore Employment Opportunity and Growth, or LEGO, and that puts students in work placements where they might learn, say, mechanical skills, or they might learn daycare setting skills, or in this case, land-based skills, like preparing something harvested from the land. And that time's counted towards school credits. So Favel hadn't done anything quite like skinning an animal before this day, but he did have a couple uncles who used to do a lot of hunting, harvesting, but Favel never got a chance to learn this stuff directly, and he was saying that he felt kind of like he missed out on something.
Keeps people in touch with the land, keeps them going out, keeps them doing things, keeps them busy. It feels pretty good. I really do hope for generations to come that people keep doing skinning and trapping. It's part of history that's never stopped, and it'll probably keep going on forever.
So he might be part of that, helping it to go on forever. Like I said, he felt like he missed out on something, but he did have this sort of sense of optimism about him after he got to actually try it out firsthand. And he says he wants to continue doing that. He wants to try trapping.
Now, how did the program coordinator, you mentioned Andrea Neiser, learn how to do all the things that she's teaching to the students, including trapping?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I was just talking about Owen, who didn't really get direct exposure or get taught how to do this stuff. Neither did Andrea. It turns out that she picked this stuff up 5 years ago in her mid-30s. So at the time, she's looking for a way to get outside more, learn some more outdoor skills, maybe earn a little extra money as a side benefit. So her husband's uncle teaches her how to trap 5 years ago. She gets out there, picks up all the skills. A few years later, Division posts this land-based coordinator gig, and she applied thinking, this is a great way for me to pass on what I'm learning, but it also presents an opportunity for her to get in touch with elements of her own heritage.
My family does have Métis heritage, so it's nice to learn and carry on those traditions as well. It's important. I mean, these traditions are dying out fast. It's important for us to learn them and then pass them down to our youth as well. They don't have the opportunity at home, all of them, so it's nice for them to have the option to learn at school.
At home, outside of this school, Andrea says she tries to get her 3 daughters, all of them under the age of 10, out in the bush as much as possible. So they're familiar with how hunting and trapping can be a way of connecting with nature.
Now, speaking of daughters, a lot of these activities like hunting, fishing, trapping have traditionally been more male dominated. And then maybe even skills that get passed down to boys and to men.
Mm-hmm.
Did you talk to any girls in the class who were taking part in this? What did they think?
Yeah, in fact, I did. There was probably about a dozen young people taking part. 4 or 5 of them were girls. And one of them was Nahani Shorting. She's 17 years old from Little Saskatchewan First Nation. She's in grade 11 at Ashland Central. So this wasn't her first rodeo, so to speak. It was the second time for her doing the coyote skinning in particular. She's getting pretty confident at it. And she actually just got certified as a trapper about 6 months ago. She's 17. So Nahani also did grow up learning to hunt. She got her first deer at 13. Her dad and grandfather, they still hunt and trap back home. So all of that in her upbringing, that's instilled in her an appreciation for how everything is connected.
I would probably try aim for a land-based coordinator on my reserve one day if I can't reach my dream job, which is welding, right? I want to go to trade school for that and whatnot, but maybe I'd first take the step to help my community out. And I have multiple cousins, and I would teach them. It's probably what my dad would want anyways, to carry on the legacy and the knowledge of what I know about hunting and providing for your family at a young age.
So, I mean, Nahani sounds like a pretty strong ambassador for the power of these land-based programs, I think. And also, Andrea, you might want to watch out. She has her eyes on your job.
I bet she does. She could teach that program now, it sounds like. Man, there's a strength of character on rural Manitoba, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So every time we leave the perimeter, we're reminded of our friends and our neighbors. And, I know that I lived rurally myself as well, briefly. But, it's awesome to be out this way. Loved hearing from the students. Thank you, Bryce.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mars.
That's Bryce Hoy, who's with us live in Ashland, Manitoba at the Chicken Chef this morning. He's a reporter. He's been here all week, and he'll have more stories in the weeks ahead as he collects stories for our Communities in Focus CBC Manitoba on location in the West Interlake project. So he'll spend the week here in Ashland, Ericsdale, and the Narrows, unearthing great community stories like that for our pop-up bureau. Remember, there's also office hours with one of our producers here. If you want to drop in and you're listening and you're in the area, you can come and pitch a story.
Whether it's breaking news from around the world, across the country, or in your own hometown, it's all at your fingertips on the CBC News app. Get the top stories from where you live under the local tab, or watch video clips, live events, and the national on your smartphone or tablet. Get all the news you want, when you want it, where you want it, with the CBC News app. Download the app for free today.
8:25 a.m. is the time right now, and it's minus 12 in Winnipeg. It's been around minus 19 out here in Ashland, but it is sunny and cold today here in these parts, and your drive should be fine. In Winnipeg, there are some issues, so please call if you have any updates on any of the problems that have been happening. 788-3093. Abby's keeping touching base with traffic and keeping updated. It is 8:26. Now, as you're hearing, Communities in Focus is about sharing individual stories, but it's also about reflecting a way of life as we explore different parts of the province. And so you've been hearing, especially this half hour, a lot about the strength of character of the rural people, but you've also been hearing a lot about hunting and recreation and fishing. And when it comes to that, Lori Goulet knows all about it. She's the manager of a Narrow Sunset Lodge, and she has worked there for the past 7 years. And the Narrows, for people that don't know, from Ashland you drive about half an hour, and you're at the part of Lake Manitoba where, well, it gets narrow. And that is where the lodge is, and there's cabins, and it's just a beautiful part of our province all around the lake. Thanks for popping on the air here with us, Lori. I appreciate it.
Good morning. It's awesome being here.
So what do you see as the future of that beautiful part of the Narrows where you work? What's going on up there in terms of recreation?
Well, we winter time is, it's a little slow. We have our commercial fishermen that are a huge success this year. I mean, the fishing was awesome for them. We have our anglers for ice fishing. We're actually having an ice fishing derby this weekend on Saturday, held by the Lake Manitoba Game and Fish. It's
amazing.
It is. It's wonderful. It's a great community for just volunteers and
the recreational people also come out here, and it's seasonal, so your population around the Narrows specifically, to look at that part of the West Interlake, really does explode. Like if there's maybe 40-50 residents on this side of the lake where
Correct.
we are, it grows to like 400 at
oh
least,
yeah,
maybe
more, probably plus.
Yeah.
We have there's seasonal campground, there's cabins.
Yep.
We've been coming up here since 2003. I'm a city slicker, and my husband and I decided to move here 7 years ago.
So what have you loved about it? Because I was born and raised in the city as well, I mentioned, but briefly lived rurally. I don't even know that you could count where I lived rurally. I was in Steinbach, so it's a city. People are going to go, that's not rural, but I reported rurally. But for you, what have you loved about the lifestyle here in the Narrows?
The people, the community, the nature, just minimizing our life and simplifying it, and just enjoying the nature and the water. The lake is wonderful. The Narrows is the hub of it all, and I love working there. It's a wonderful place to work.
Are you guys fully bounced back after the pandemic? I mean, I noticed there's a greenhouse. There's a food truck. You talked about the recreation, and things have been busy. I heard this winter's been booming with snowmobilers around Lake Manitoba. In the Narrows area with recreation, are you fully bounced back in terms of people coming to explore this part of the province?
There are trails. Yeah, there's trails that come up to the Narrows and then go west. We've seen traffic. The lodge, our store is open during the winter.
Mm-hmm.
We have, a little grab and go or
but
coffee.
But even in the summertime, it was busy last year?
Yes, it's population, like we said, it explodes in the summer.
How much of that comes from outside of Manitoba?
I would say more Manitobans than anything.
Got it.
Actually, when you say traveling, like travelers coming back and forth, the cyclists or so they're kind of stop at the lodge and camp out for a night or two and take in the sunset or.
Oh, the sunset last night was
beautiful. Met some really interesting people from, if they're traveling Canada.
I bet you have. Where can people go for more information? Briefly give us the website.
We're basically on Facebook. It's Narrows Sunset Lodge Facebook page.
Awesome.
We're working on our website right now.
So check out Facebook. Narrows Sunset Lodge on Facebook. Thank you.
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you so much, and you have a wonderful time here.
Thanks for having us in the West Interlake. The CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is sunny. It's minus 12 right now in Winnipeg. Beautiful sunshine out there. We will see a few clouds roll in this afternoon. A high today of minus 5. Domo Gas says it is pulling out all the stops to keep jumping to the pump. Imperial Oil shut down its pipeline from Gretna to Winnipeg on Friday last week after a strain was found on a portion of the line. The company says the repairs will take about 3 months. Graham Carlisle at Domo's Western Canada headquarters in Winnipeg says they had a close call earlier this week. The Domo on Donald came close to running dry.
Like everyone, we're just working hard to bring product in by truck and by rail, and just trying to do our best to stay open and service our customers as usual.
Although he says they do have to travel further to get that gas, Domo has contracted haulers who drive to Gretna, Regina, and Saskatoon. And he says it stands to reason additional costs from driving and delivering the fuel may be reflected in the price at the pumps. Well, Well, it will be an apology 68 years in the making, and it happens today. Premier Wab Kinew will apologize on behalf of the province to Edward Ambrose and Richard Beauvais. The lawyer for the two men who were switched at birth says he wants the Manitoba government to give them fair compensation. The two men were born at the same hospital in Arborg and were taken home by the other's biological parents. Lawyer Bill Gange says it took years for the province to even acknowledge the mistake.
Nothing is going to bring back the last 68 years. I understand that. But in our judicial process, the only thing that we have is money. I'm hopeful that the government is going to respond thoughtfully.
Ambrose and Beauvais met for the first time in person earlier this week. City councillors are going to decide the fate of Winnipeg's most iconic intersection today. Mayor Scott Gillingham came out supporting the reopening of Portage and Main to pedestrians earlier this month. He says the cost of repairing the concourse under Portage and Main doesn't make financial sense. Today, councillors vote on a report recommending decommissioning the concourse and beginning the design and construction of the reopened intersection to pedestrians. If it's passed today, Gillingham hopes to have the barricades down and people walking across Portage and Main by 2025. A BC man who lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in an investment fraud is thankful he's been able to get his money back. And he credits the recovery of that money to actions taken in a Winnipeg fraud case that happened around the same time. Alan Landa in Vancouver was devastated when he learned a fraudster had taken more than $700,000, money he sent by wire transfer to what he thought would be a safe investment.
I couldn't believe that I blew my nest egg. I just honestly, I wanted to curl up into a little ball and never be seen again.
The bank put a freeze on the account where Landa's money was received by the alleged fraud. He filed a lawsuit and got a court order to recover $735,000 he had invested for his business. A local organization supporting children in care is getting to work on implementing Bill C-92. That bill would give jurisdiction to Indigenous communities and families. Mia Gunther, CEO at the Knowles Centre, says the bill offers important access for children.
When you think of Bill C-92 and supporting families in having a voice and having making sure that the children in care have some agency around who they get to see, who their support system is, and connecting them with families.
More than 80% of children at Knowles Centre identify as Indigenous. The organization runs a foster care program, group home, and independent living for kids who age out of care. And facing questions on snow clearing, taxes, and potholes, as well as bike lanes, Brandon City planners have laid out the future for that city over the next 30 years. An open house was part of the final chance for community feedback on the Brandon City Plan. Planners say growth is a key part. Brandon is expected to see about 10,000 new residents over the next 3 decades. Maureen Monroe has lived in Brandon for many years, and her biggest concern? Housing and development.
I don't agree that we would have all of Brandon mixed development, to be honest. I think there still has to be different levels of residential, and I don't agree that there should be commercial involved in the neighborhoods and so forth.
The city of Brandon's been consulting on a community plan for 2 years now, and that plan is expected to go to Brandon City Council in about a month. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
So thanks to Heather, thanks to Megan Ketcherson, our news department, as well as Abby Adiemi and May McKillop back in our studio, and Brad Lillies as well. Also here in Asher, and I can't thank everyone by name, but I do want to thank Kurt Stark, who's been a chicken chef up early to let us in here this morning. Damien and Kiara, who were so lovely with us this morning. All of the guests here who were on the program, and all of the many people who've been sharing stories in the West Interlake. We've just been really welcomed, and we're grateful. Thank you to Corey Funk, my partner in crime, so to speak, on the road with me here, getting the show on the air live from Communities in Focus, as well as to Bryce Hoy and Nadia Kidwai, who remain in community. Remember, they've got office hours. Nadia's going to be here this afternoon. If you're in this area with a story to pitch, please come on down and tell us all about your life here in the West Interlake. It's minus 12 in Winnipeg, and our high today is minus 5. Remember, as we get off the air here, Grant and Kenniston, motor vehicle knocked down a traffic standard, lights and flashing, all four-way stop, and a collision Pembina just after Dowker Avenue as well. That's between Cottage Bakery and Vincent Massey Collegiate. Currents coming up next. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and I will talk to you again tomorrow right here on Information Radio. We'll be back live in our studio in Winnipeg. Take care, everyone, and goodbye from the West Interlake.